derp. Derp derpity derpy derp. Derpa 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 derp. Derp derp. Da teedly-toe.
No one ever thinks they'll get sucked into a cult, but it can happen to anyone. Here are 5 red flag warning signs that you've fallen prey to a predatory cult. Cults use constant lies and propaganda, indoctrinating people into believing their cult is right and good. Members and outsiders alike are shunned for disagreeing with the cult's ideology or its leaders, who are believed to have superhuman qualities. They're discouraged from asking questions or thinking critically and are unable to change their minds even when presented with clear evidence of corruption, incompetence, deceit, misconduct, and evil. Cults constantly engage in black and white thinking and fear of the outgroup. We're good, they're bad. We're enlightened, they're brainwashed. We're right, they're wrong. Only our group is moral. Collectivism is key. Cults exploit you financially, taking your money and providing little to no accountability as to how they spend it. They'll insist it's for the good of the group and shame you for not contributing. Cults emphasize special doctrines and set rigid rules and regulations that demand strict obedience. You're punished if you dare to disobey these rules or fail to comply exactly how they expect you to. You might even be punished even when you comply fully or haven't disobeyed at all. Authority is paramount across all variations and brands of cultism, and defying it is sin that warrants brutality. Cults demand intense loyalty to the group and its leaders, who are considered to know best what's right for everyone. Because of this, there's never a good reason to leave. If you do, it's because you're wrong, bad, crazy, and a threat to the security of the group. If this is you, don't panic. Simply stop making excuses for psychopathic authoritarians of all partisan persuasions who rule over a system that has trained you since birth to make moral exceptions for their depraved, violent, megalomaniacal monopoly over your freedom. Take responsibility for your life and claim your own self-worth so you aren't susceptible to the false promises of these manipulative power mongers who convince you your subservience to their power sets you free. The cult leaders and their enforcement henchmen can't control people if their followers stop believing in their propaganda, refuse to buy into their fake authority, and start believing in themselves. Sound like too much work? It's still not as hard as facing the ramifications of being a slave to a death cult that's rapidly destroying humanity.
Welcome to the Independent Review, a weekly podcast where we bring you the latest from the world of independent journalism. Whether you're a news junkie, a curious learner, or just looking for a fresh perspective away from the corporate media, this is the show for you. So join us now as we dive into the world of independent journalism on the Independent Review.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Independent Review. Today's show includes clips from Johnny Vedmore, Ryan Cristian, James Corbett, the Indie News Network, and Allison Morrow. Let's go to our first clip with Johnny Vedmore on the Lennon assassination.
December 1980 to 1987, no one knew his name. It was always just referred to as the doorman, right? Which gave everybody, so everyone was kind of thinking, well, who is this guy? Then a journalist called Jim Gaines, who I've done an article on my Substack about, he's a counsel of foreign relations, a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. Yeah, I know. Yeah, you can't make it up. Yeah, but he is actually a bona fide journalist. They're not always bona fide when they're attached to this case. And he was at the time writing for People magazine. He did an article in 1987 for People magazine about Chapman. He got access to Chapman's cell, recorded lots of interviews with Chapman. And he basically said Chapman was talking to the doorman that night. He revealed in 87. The doorman was an ex-Cuban, anti-Castro guy who was talking to Chapman about the JFK assassination and the Bay of Pigs, right?
Oh, so that's convenient.
Yeah.
So my God.
A lot of red flags there. All red flag. So basically everyone went, okay, Bay of Pigs, JFK, Cuba, Castro. Okay, let's look, Jose Padermo. So this is pre-internet, but somehow they got to find out, probably, I'd say in 99 when the internet started to come into use, they realized that there was an operator at the Bay of Pigs called Jose Padermo, who was in a group called Op 40, Brigade 2506, who were a group of basically CIA ex-Cuban far-right assassins who were going to go in after the Bay of Pigs and clean up Nazi style and execute anybody who wasn't part of the program. So Bay of Pigs Jose Padermo was a very, very serious individual. I mean, one of the most serious individuals, because if he was in charge of this brigade of assassins, imagine how serious Jose Padermo was. Now, Jose worked with Frank Sturgis. Frank Sturgis has often talked about him. Sturgis says that Bay of Pigs Jose died in 74. Now, I've looked into Bay of Pigs Padermo, and he was born around about 1912. He died in 74. So
pretty old, man. Pretty old.
Pretty old. It kind of fits. The problem is I've actually found out about Dakota Jose Padermo now, and they are two different people. Dakota Jose Padermo was born in 34. He started working at the Dakota in 69. He stopped working there in 96. He then went on and he died in 2010 or something. So I've kind of got his timeline. He's a completely different Jose Padermo to Bay of Pigs Jose Padermo. But what's interesting is I think Jim Gaines was dropping in the ultimate red herring here. I just think because ever since that 87 article, every single John Lennon assassination theory article, book, whatever, some people have even written books about this, have said, it was Bay of Pigs, Jose Padermo. He's the most serious assassin in CIA history. He must have killed John Lennon, but he wasn't the guy that was on the door. It was a different Jose Padermo. And it's kind of, we were talking earlier about poisoning the well. It's poisoned the well now for a long, long time. Now, I think Dakota Jose Padermo is a very suspicious individual. And I'll tell you why. One, they're concealing his statement, which I think is suspicious in itself. Two, the actions that he did on the night of the murder are very strange. According to the official narrative of Mark Chapman, what Dakota Jose Padermo Dorman did was, after gunfire, Chapman doesn't remember what happened to his gun, but he remembers that it was on the ground in front of him. So perhaps he dropped it there, or perhaps someone else dropped it there. Jose Padermo then kicks the gun, and a witness says he saw him do this, to the back of the driveway, okay, where the vestibule doors are. He then goes and walks up to the gun and starts pacing around it. Now, Chapman at this point is docile. He's taken his coat off. He's standing by the corner of the driveway and by the roadside. He's got his Catcher in the Rye book out, and he's starting to read Catcher in the Rye. Almost, you could say, like a programmed assassin that somehow slightly malfunctioned. But
so
what's
convenient
is,
you came in. So convenient you came on a week after Dana came on.
Brilliant. Talking
about MK Ultra
well, we're going to get into MK Ultra. I'm going to blow your mind of MK Ultra in a minute, Johnny. So basically, he's going to come into our story very big, very shortly. So basically, what the doorman Jose Padermo does, Dakota, he goes to the gun, starts walking around. Now, I told you about that lift operator, didn't I? Joseph Manny, who's down in the basement. Now, he hears gunfire. He comes up with two colleagues, and the colleagues verify this in the written statements that I got. And he comes out and he sees Jose Padermo. And Joe Manny goes, "What's going on? What was that gunfire?" And he said, Jose said, "Pick this gun up and take it down to the basement and get rid of it." Now, at this point, the gun is not with Chapman. It's with Jose at the back of the driveway. Okay, we don't know that's Chapman's gun, but somehow it's there. Ask yourself this question, though, Johnny. Why didn't Jose pick it up himself? Chapman's docile. He's kicked the gun away from him. Chapman's reading the book, just doing zero. Why did Jose not want to pick that gun up and hide it himself? Why did he wait for someone else to turn up and actually grab the gun, which he did with his own fingerprints. And what Joe Manny then did was his two co-workers was he grabbed the gun, did what Jose told him to do. He went downstairs to the basement, put it in a drawer, came back up into the driveway and went into the back office where he saw Lennon in the back office bleeding out with Jay Hastings and Yoko Ono. Okay, so Joe Manny is quite an important witness. So but always when he came back up the first time to get the gun, when he came up the second time,
so you think
Chapman.
he's the only like uncontrolled witness around this point?
He is in a way, Joe Manny, because I've got two other witness statements that tell me what he did exactly. We know he's not lying. Sadly, Joe Manny has lied a little bit. In the interviews I've done with him, he's tried to erase the two co-workers that came up with him. He's tried to sort of get all the glory himself for picking up the gun and taking it downstairs. But what Joe didn't know when he was telling me all these tales was that I've actually got all the statements, and I know that these two people did come up with him, and they went back down with him, and they came up with him again. So he's slightly embellished it to make himself be the sole kind of witness. But what's important about Joe Manny is when he went into the back office to see Lennon and Yoko and Jay Hastings, the concierge, a Dakota resident called Jack Henderson came down to the scene and said he saw Joe Manny and Yoko and Jay Hastings and John's body in the back office bleeding out. So we've got a kind of witness who had nothing to do with the people who were working there that night who said he saw that scene. So we've got that. So here's the thing about Perdomo, though. After that, he disappears from history, right? But what's really suspicious about Perdomo, Johnny, this is what's incredible, is even though he was a doorman, a few months leading up to John's murder, he wasn't working the door. He allegedly had bad legs. And he was working in the back office with Jay Hastings as concierge. And Jay Hastings and Joe Manny were doubling up to do the door for Jose Perdomo because of his bad legs. But that particular night, Jose Perdomo says to Jay Hastings, "My legs are feeling okay tonight. It's quite a warm night. I think I'll do the door tonight. I think tonight I'm going to work the front. I'm going to be next to Chapman when he's there. I'm going to make sure that I'm right on the action," which is what he did. And he did work the door that night and saw what he did and did what he did. But then after the murder, I know, it's so suspicious. And then after the murder, Johnny, do you know what he does? He goes back into the back office the next day and says, "I don't ever want to work the door again." So the whole world, when all the cameras were fixed on those gates for days on end, that you didn't see Jose Perdomo's face. He was a ghost. He made sure of it. And he carried on working at the Dakota for another, I believe it was 14 years, possibly 16 years, where he worked the back office in the basement. He was doing menial tasks, but he never, ever worked the door again, and he disappeared. So he is a man of great interest, because if Mark Chapman was triggered by somebody, which is the case, I believe, in Syria and the RFK assassination, you do need someone there to kind of trigger a Manchurian candidate to think he's shooting blanks when he's not. Jose Perdomo would have been the guy to do that. He would have been right next to Chapman, just him and Chapman all by themselves, ready to go. So it's really important that you get all these statements. See, what's a murder like this, which is why I'm hoping the book will reveal most of it, is you have to take in all these different witness statements, Johnny. You have to take in people like Joe Manny slightly changing the truth. Yeah. And you have to kind of give it your best guess, because there's so much noise around each statement and around each perception of the murder. But when you actually coalesce the forensics and the actual where Chapman was and where Lennon was and where Yoko was, and when you work out exactly the geography of the murder itself, you then realize that Chapman couldn't have done it. Because here's the really important thing. I said to Ron Hoffman, the detective, I said, "Ron, where did you think John was when he was struck?" He said, "Well, he was on the stairway, beyond the vestibule doors, in a part of the Dakota entrance that Mark Chapman could not even see, never alone shoot Johnny." Remember, Mark's out at the front of the driveway. The stairway is inside the vestibule doors at the end of the driveway, up some steps. So it's kind of completely out of Chapman's view. So I thought, how do I get this verified? So I spoke to Jay Hastings. I said, "When did you hear gunfire?" He said, "Well, I heard the door open, the vestibule door. I heard John walking up. I heard the door open, i.e. the vestibule door squeak open. And after that point, when obviously John is now inside the vestibule, then I heard gunfire." And then he said he heard gunfire. Here's another interesting point. He said he heard the vestibule windows break with some bullets going through those glass panels in the doors after gunfire, not during gunfire. He heard gunfire, then he heard those windows pop out. Now, those windows are really important. If you go to my Instagram page, Johnny, Assassination of Lennon, you'll see there's various images that have been, people have tried to conceal these images, but we've managed to get some shots of these doors now. There's 3 bullet holes in these glass panel vestibule doors. But the problem is, Johnny, they're all really low down. They're really low down. They're not upper left chest, upper left back. They're kind of stomach, lower back height. Okay. So if they were the bullets passing through Chapman, shooting from the back into the front, they're in the wrong position. Okay. Mm-hmm. And another really important point, Johnny, is there's no blood around these glass panel bullet holes. And I've spoken to I've spoken to the cops and the Dakota workers. I said, was there any blood splatter around those bullet holes? They said, no, there was no blood spatter whatsoever. So those bullet holes were caused by someone missing John, not hitting John, because if they were hitting John, you still there, Johnny?
Yeah, I'm still
you there.
there.
Oh, perfect. Right.
Are you talking about, is it this?
Yeah, that's one. That's the bullet hole in the far vestibule door, and you can see the stairs that John staggered up. But if there's another picture further down of the 2 bullet holes, if you go, well done putting this up. If you go right,
give me a second to work it out.
This is very impressive.
It's a future. It's a future.
Keep going. You'll get to.
There's this one.
That's there. That one there. That would do it. Now look that's the door that John walked into. You can see the handle that he had to pull open. That's the one facing Chapman and the roadside. Look at those 2 bullet holes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you go to another one, which is a full length, you can just go to one more, please, Johnny. A bit further down. That one there. We see the door. We see the door and the guy standing near the door. That's that one. Yeah, have a look at that one. Now, see the 2 bullet holes, right? See the guy standing.
Oh, yeah, I see.
See the guy standing behind the door.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now that little bit of light. That's not a bullet hole. That's just a crack and a light reflecting off the crack. Yeah. So the 2 bullet holes there, that's it. It's those 2 there. They are lower back. They're not upper left chest, and there's no blood splatter. So they could not have been caused by Mark Chapman shooting John and the bullets coming through John's front and into those holes. And remember, behind those 2 men is the bullet hole we saw just earlier leading up to the stairway. So for Mark Chapman's bullets to actually cause that, they'd have had to kind of gone around in a boomerang fashion. To get through.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, those bullet holes shouldn't be there. So, do you know, I think I'm now at the point now, Johnny, where I can kind of reveal what I think happened. I think what happened was, and Ron Hoffman has actually said this on my YouTube channel. There's a clip, there's a piece of news rushes. It's never broadcast. If you go to my YouTube channel with Assassination Lennon, you can see a Ron Hoffman statement that Detective Hoffman, the lead detective, that he gave outside the Roosevelt Hospital. And he says quite clearly, probably an hour after the murder, before the official narrative has been bedded down, that John Lennon was shot inside the vestibule. Inside. Not outside, not going in. He was shot inside the vestibule. There's another guy called Sean Strube, who's a witness who came along after the murder and got a lot of press coverage, but he didn't see anything. But he said he spoke to the doorman, i.e. Jose Padermo. Again, it's on the YouTube channel. And the doorman says to Sean Strube, John was shot when he was walking inside the vestibule. So we now know that John was shot in an area that Mark Chapman could not see, in the front and not the back. So what I think's happened is it's very much a Sirhan RFK playbook. You've got a patsy, a program patsy, not a program Manchurian candidate, because MK Ultra was very much focusing in those days on getting an MK Ultra patsy, not assassin, someone who wasn't there to kill, but was there to pick up the tab for the murder. And what happened with Sirhan RFK is, and Lisa Pease has done a great bit of work on her book, A Lie Too Big to Fail, on this. I think she's nailed it. Is that Sirhan was there shooting blanks to take attention away from the real killer, who was standing behind RFK and shot him in the back of the head. And we now know from the autopsy that's come out that that's exactly where RFK was shot. He was shot from behind, not the front. So they always get this kind of front and back exit thing. So I think Chapman was triggered. Padermo is clearly a suspect for this. To start shooting when John was by the vestibule doors, he starts shooting blanks very loudly. A cab driver called Richard Peterson said he saw him there with a gun at the foot of the headway, at the front of the headway, a driveway. So we know we got another witness that put Chapman there and not at the vestibule doors. So he's 25, 30 feet away from John. When John heard the blanks firing, he goes into the vestibule area, which is where he would have gone anyway, to get away from the gunfire. I believe the assassin, the murder was there, and I believe he was using a silencer. I believe he walked up to John and surprised him and shot him 4 times, close range, which is what they all say it should have been. including the detectives on the night of the murder, said Chapman must have walked up to him and shot him at close range because they were so professional. Shot him 4 times, upper left chest, and I believe he missed with 2 or 3 bullets that then went through the vestibule doors, because the assassin would have been on the stairs shooting down into John coming up the steps. And I believe those 3 bullet holes were caused by the second shooter, and I believe the 4 holes in John's upper left chest was caused by a second shooter that was concealed in the vestibule area. And once that was done, that shooter could then go back into the Dakota if he wanted to, and stay wherever he wanted to stay, or he could have gone back out into the driveway. And if Chapman was imagining he was doing something that he wasn't really doing, which is what I believe happened, I believe the second shooter could have walked past Chapman, and I doubt if he would even known what was going on. So that is, I believe, what I'm convinced now that that's the only feasible way that Lennon could have been assassinated, when you take into account the forensics on the ground, what Chapman said he did, what the medical evidence gives us, and what the detectives at the time said, and where the detectives at the time said John was shot, which is inside that vestibule area on the stairway. So you've kind of, it's game, set, and match, Johnny. It's game, set, and match. There really is no other feasible way. Now, you could say, and they do say, perhaps John turned, which is a really important thing. Chapman could have called out, because one of the narratives that they tried to get into the media was Chapman called out. He must have called out. Chapman has never said he called out. Really important. Why? And if he did, why would he conceal that? I called out and he turned. I shot him. Chapman said he shot him, so why wouldn't he add that detail? Jay Hastings, the concierge, said he never heard anyone calling out to John Lennon. Interestingly, Yoko Ono, in a written statement from Ron Hoffman's book that I put on my Instagram channel, you can actually see the writing yourself, says quite clearly, we heard a noise in the street, we never turned around. We kept walking. So even Yoko Ono said they never turned around. And even if John, let's just say if all of this isn't true, and John somehow did turn around and nobody heard it and Chapman didn't remember it, this is what would have to have happened, Johnny. He'd have had to walk toward those vestibule doors. Chapman would have called out his name. John would have turned around, right? And for those bullet holes to be in those low down positions, he'd have had to get down on his knees or stoop. Chapman would have had to have shot him 4 times in his upper left chest area in a type of loudly, bang, 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 bang. And John would have had to stand exactly dead still for 3 of those bullets to pass through him, and then somehow dive bomb down into those low glass panel doors and make those bullet holes. At that point, with these 4 bullets in him that have ripped his heart apart, which we know, it's what the doctors and nurses said, his main arteries of his heart were ripped to shreds. He then turns around. Thank you, Mr. Chapman, for shooting me 4 times. He walks up to that vestibule door, pulls it open, walks up the stairs, walks through some other doors, walks through some other doors, walks through one office, goes into another office. It's just BS. Clearly, that's
so.
Impossible.
How does he get into where he gets to eventually?
That's a really, really good question, Johnny. Really good question. And that was something that I've had to really work hard at to assess. And this is where it starts to get a bit dubious with Jose Padermo and the concierge Jay Hastings, because here's the anomalies. Joe Manny, the lift operator, when he came up to the scene the second time after hiding the gun, he said he went into the concierge's area and he saw John in the back office, okay, which is where Jack Henderson, the Dakota resident, said he saw him, and where Jay Hastings said he ran into. But Joe Manny says 2 other things. He says Jay Hastings' shirt was covered in blood, like literally covered from head to toe. So he assumed John must have ran into his arms. And Jay Hastings also said that there was a pool of blood in Jay Hastings' front office, right? And Jay Hastings just imagined seeing this scenario. But Joe Manny must have imagined seeing this scenario, the lift operator, that what he thought happened was John must have ran into Jay Hastings' arms in the front office, collapsed on the floor, bled out a little bit, and then somehow Jay and Yoko must have dragged John's body into the back office, right? It's the only scenario that he can put together to, come to a conclusion of how that pool of blood got in the front office. But Jay Hastings said no. Joe Manny wasn't there, though we know from Jack Henderson's testimony that he was. Jay Hastings said that there was no Joe Manny. Joe Manny never saw any of this, and John just ran past him and ran into the back office, and Yoko came in a few minutes later. So that puts Jay Hastings in a slightly dubious dubious place for me.
They're all in a very dubious place.
They are. They are. You know, Joe Manny, Hastings, and the Padermo. None of their witness statements match up. None. They were all there, and they're all dubious. They all lie.
The Dakota lobby sounds like a nightmare, to be perfectly honest. If you want to get to your room, For someone who's worked in many lobbies in many hotels, I can tell you that's not a place I'd want to work.
I'll give you another little bit of detail, Johnny. I'm giving you all the goodies tonight or today. Basically, a man who worked with the Lennons, a guy called Michael Medeiros, who was their kind of plant waterer archivist, nice guy. He was working with them before the murder and after the murder, so he was there. He said the morning after the murder, him and the Lennons' bodyguard, a very dubious guy called Doug McDougal, who was an ex-FBI bodyguard for the Lennons. Could you believe that?
Sorry. Did you? Yeah. Wait. So we got to repeat a couple of things.
Yeah. Let's go for it.
You said the words together with a straight face. You said Doug McDougal.
Yeah, that's
Doug
right.
McDougal. Yeah, you said Doug McDougal.
Doug
McDougal. Do the dog, Dougie. Dougie McDougal, a good Scottish fan. So you got Doug McDougal doing the doggy, and what else have you got?
Well, here's what's amazing about. Let's fill in Doug McDougal here. Doug McDougal was their bodyguard, hired by Yoko Ono in the summer that year, and he was an ex-FBI man. Right now, ex-FBI agent. And I mean,
for people who don't understand, the FBI were really the instrument used to harass Martin Luther King for many years and eventually assassinate him, in a sense.
There's more I'm going to go into about Doug McDougal in my book. Trust me, a very dark, nefarious character with links to all kinds of dodgy things. But for now, let's go with this. This is the narrative. This is going to blow your mind. A few weeks before Lennon's murder, Doug McDougal upset Yoko by saying to her, you're being a bit loose with your security, allegedly. You need to keep quiet about your movements and where you and John go because you're going to get hit. And she said for giving her that information, allegedly Yoko put him on a leave of absence, right? And he was due to come back to work, guess when? The 9th of December, the day after John's murder, which he duly did. He turned up early morning, 9th of December, to start working for Yoko again, which means no bodyguard.
He did the doggy. Do the doggy. Dougie McDougal doing the doggy. Yeah.
So no bodyguard there that night, Johnny. Doug wasn't working because Yoko made sure of it.
Guy.
So again,
he must felt awful.
Dubious. So anyway, he turns up that night and he brings in the Pinkerton agency. Right, you know them with all their machine guns, and the whole thing is locked down with guards and agents with machine guns, all ex-FBI, dodgy men, locked down the whole building. But anyway, Michael Medeiros the next morning, let's move off Doug for now. Michael Medeiros the next morning is asked by Doug McDougal to accompany him downstairs to talk to Jose Padermo, of all people, the doorman, to find out what the doorman saw and what the doorman knows. Right, so they go down, and when Michael Medeiros told me this, I thought, at last, I'm going to find out what Jose did and what he saw. It was like, again, this light shining into a dark tunnel. So according to Medeiros, he didn't see anything. He basically, as I said, he went back. He let the Lennons out of their car. He went back to the gold booth that he stands in next to the Dakota driveway. He heard gunfire. He came out, didn't see Lennon, saw Chapman standing there. Then he ran to the vestibule stairway area where he saw Lennon's stricken body on the stairway, which fits with what Hoffman said and what everyone, which we now know is where John was hit. He then picks John's ailing body up, bleeding out body, carries him into the lobby and into Jay Hastings' office, possibly front office, possibly back, take your pick. And then he goes back out and confronts Chapman and kicks the gun to the back, and Joe Manny comes up to get the gun. Now, here's the problem with that. When he told me that, I thought at last we've got the full truth now, and they're concealing his statement because he didn't see anything and he can't shore up the official narrative. But when I spoke to Jay Hastings, the concierge, about this, who you would imagine would see Jose carrying John's body into the lobby.
Most definitely you would see him, wouldn't you?
He said no. He said, no, that didn't happen. Didn't see Jose. John just came running in with bullet holes in him, saying, I'm shot, ran past me, ran into the front office, ran into the back office, collapsed and died. Now, here's a problem with Joe. Another problem with Joe Hastings is his shirt, his bloody shirt that Joe Manny insists to me was just covered in blood. Jay Hastings actually sold this shirt a few years back, and it's you can see it on my Instagram.
Wow. How
You can see
much
it on
did
my
that?
Instagram.
Oh,
I think he got about 30 grand, 35 grand for it, something like that, $35,000. But here's the thing: it's not covered in blood. It's not covered in blood, Johnny. It's got a few spots of blood, but it's not covered in blood.
Mm-hmm.
So again, someone is not telling the truth here. It's not. If you go right, it's one of the most right to the top.
Right to the top.
Right to the
We're gonna
top,
see a
and
nice...
you'll see it. There it is. There's the shirt itself.
Oh, why this one by here?
Yeah. Does that shirt look covered in blood to you?
No.
So then, when I said to Jay, how did Joe
looks
Manny
deep
think there was...
around the pits there. Looks deep around
Yeah,
the pits for sure.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a
Looks
few
like an old
spots.
shirt, but
There's kind of 3 spots of blood. Interestingly, opposite John's.
no, I listen. I remember I worked in one hotel where we had a guy who walked in at like 3-4 o'clock in the morning while we were doing the cleaning up. It was the Holiday Inn in Cardiff City Centre, opposite the castle, and I was managing the place, and I was with this guy, a friend of mine who had got a job there called Spook, and we got attacked by this guy who would come randomly in. We told him to leave, he wouldn't leave. We tried to coax him out, and then he started attacking us. But the problem was for him, he was terrible at attacking us. So we had it all on camera in the end, because there's courses in the lobby of a hotel. So we were dancing around, and one of us was pushing him while the other one was attracting his attention. And we did this for a while until some mates turned up, and we run over to get his mates, and we're like, "Can you sort out this guy?" And then I turned around, and he's like running towards me. So I swung the guy around in a circle, and his face went straight into like a revolving door, basically, and he lost a load of front teeth, I think, and he broke his nose, and there was blood everywhere, and he just slumped to the floor, and we thought he was dead. And there was his mates standing around looking, and we were standing around, and it was just a stop for a moment, because there was no movement, and we were like, "Oh God, this has ended badly." And my friend Spook leant down and just touched him slightly, and the guy swung up, and Spook had this wonderful Versace shirt on. He cared very much about his brands, did Spook, and the guy covered it in blood, completely covered it in blood, like it was proper, like all drained, as he just tried to get on top of him, and just was spraying blood out all over the place. And so that shirt was covered in blood. Now that looked like a nightmarish scene, and I like that shirt. There's no way that we're talking about the same thing. But anyway,
you're right, Johnny. And I said to Jay, Jay, why did Joe Manny say your shirt was covered in blood? He said, well, it probably got blood, he said, when I helped the cops carry John's body out to the police car, which is allegedly what happened. In fact, I know it happened because I spoke to the 2 cops who carried John's body out, who came on the scene and carried John's body out to the police car and off to the Roosevelt, where, all the doctor and nurses merry-go-round happened. And I then said to the 2 cops, did Jay Hastings, the concierge, help you carry the body out? And he said, no, he never helps carry the body out. I spoke to Joe Manny about it, and he said, nope, Jay Hastings didn't help carry the body out. I spoke to witnesses who were out on the street who saw Lennon's body being carried out. Did you see a concierge in the Dakota helping the cops? No. No one, no. It was just the cops carried John's body out. So Hastings said to me he got a lot of blood on his body, on his shirt, helping carry John's bloody body out to the police car with the cops, which he didn't actually do. So Hastings is, but again, it could be like Joe Manny, where just people just embellish and add and try to make themselves more in a story.
You can only do that for a certain amount of time. And if you're doing that within witness statements, then it's criminal, isn't it?
Yeah, Hastings, and here's another thing about witness statements and Hastings. That's an interesting segue. Hastings never gave a witness statement. How strange is that? I said to him, why didn't you give a witness statement? Why didn't you go to the police station and give a witness statement? He said, they never asked, and I didn't want to do it. And we know Dakota Jose went down there. We know Joe Manny went down there.
Okay.
We know
so
that went down there.
That does mean that it is more likely that if that was true and he did do it for those reasons, it is more likely that he would embellish or change his story over time, because he wouldn't have had any reason not to. Like if there's a document that is written down somewhere, people tend not to turn away from it just in case it come up again in the future. So yeah, that would make sense. Go on. Dog Walker went down there.
Dog Walker went down there. Elliot Gross, when he came to the Dakota after we went to visit the Dakota, the chief medical officer, he spoke to one person. Can you guess who he spoke to? Who wanted to talk to you that night? Jay Hastings.
Wow.
Jay Hastings, the concierge, the only person he spoke to. Jay doesn't remember that conversation, but we know it's on record from other people that he spoke to Jay Hastings. So Jay's a very interesting character. Got no proof he was involved in the murder, but he's a very, very interesting man. He left the work at the Dakota about a week after the murder, maybe 10 days after the murder. He suddenly left the scene immediately. He said he was sacked for being late, which I don't believe after seeing such a traumatic event that anybody would sack a worker for being late after witnessing what he witnessed, but that's what he said happened. So I think I've kind of laid the scene with forensics of witnesses and all the different conflicting evidence. I think we've been going 2 hours and 15. You're right to just continue a little bit more, Johnny, because I think what I want to tell you now is where MK Ultra comes into this. Because
most
obviously
definitely. This is a good place to segue towards the
good segue. So Chapman went to the police station that night, Johnny, and he gave a statement which I put on my Substack. I called it Mark Chapman Unplugged. He didn't have a clue what he did and why he did it. He said he had nothing against Lennon, nothing against the Beatles. He didn't know why he did it. He just felt a little part inside him was fighting a big part, and the little part lost or something like that. And he just felt he had to shoot John. He was compelled. He couldn't stop himself. It was a runaway train. A confused man. He didn't even remember the gun being in his hand. He said, I don't know where the gun went. He said, I just remember I looked down and I had a book in my hand, Capturing the Rye, and all the words were kind of fuzzy on the page. And it was like his brain was malfunctioning. One other last thing about Jose Padermo, I should say, just before we get off all the witnesses. Jose said, according to Chapman, get out of here, run away, right? Which is a very strange thing for someone to say once a gun is no longer on this person and they're docile reading a novel. But also a secondary witness who I managed to get through the files called Nina Rosen said that she heard, when she came back on the scene a few seconds after hearing gunfire, she heard Jose say to Chapman, you better get out of here. The cops will be here shortly. They'll be here in a few minutes. Now, that doesn't sound to me like the sort of thing an innocent man would say to a killer who's standing there docile without a gun on him. That's kind of like, for some reason, Jose was desperate for Chapman to run.
Jose was expecting a certain series of events to happen, and suddenly there was a malfunction in Chapman.
You got it.
Okay, so there could be it could be that there was a secondary operation that went once Mark Chapman
to take Chapman out, because Central Park was across the road. If Chapman went to run, I believe Chapman was meant to run, and I believe he was meant to be taken out. A la Oswald in the cinema, and I believe he wasn't meant to live, because there was some very nefarious people, Johnny, who I'll reveal maybe in another podcast with you in my book, who were desperate to talk to Mark and get in his cell after he was arrested. Desperate, very strange intelligence-linked people who were desperate to get into Mark Chapman's cell. Now, one of those people who got into his cell, this is what's going to blow your mind. So if you imagine that Mark Chapman we know for a fact now that he was imagining he was doing something that he couldn't possibly feasibly do, right? So he was having some kind of psychotic episode. You could say he was hypnotized to think he was shooting John Lennon when he wasn't. You could say, I would say, certainly. So is there any evidence of MK Ultra intelligence hypnotism going on in Mark's life? Well, here let's just get down to it. I won't go into all the hypnotists that were throughout Mark's life leading up to the murder, but there were many. And they were linked to Christianity, they were linked to the military, and he had hypnotists in his life, all through his life, from the age of 15 to the night 25 when he shot John Lennon. And one of them was a very nefarious character who I believe broke Mark's mind through charismatic Christianity and exorcisms. And this man actually was a well-known preacher who was a well-known hypnotist who was part of an organization, would you believe, Johnny, in the 70s that actually tried to fuse Christianity, or should I say religion, and hypnotism as a good thing. They even had conferences where they talked about how these things should be fused together. Now, these charismatic exorcism prayer groups that Mark went to, Mark said he was deeply disturbed by them. Mark was just coming off a major LSD binge, and he was being kind of, I believe at that point, that was where they were breaking his mind to make it malleable. And I believe they did it through this speaking in tongues, laying of hands. And from that point onwards till today, Mark has always been convinced that he was possessed by demons. And I believe that particular thing was put into him by this preacher / hypnotist when Mark was 15 in 1970. In fact, I know it's a very nefarious character. I'll reveal all about him in my book, but this guy is a very, very dodgy guy. And I believe he was hired very early on to start grooming Mark Chapman to break his mind and get his mind ready to be used in a nefarious way. So let's get to Mark in his cell. A lawyer was hired called Herbert Adlerberg, but after 2 days, he got so many death threats on the phone, he decided to bail. The second lawyer that came in was a lawyer called Jonathan Marks, a public lawyer, who, for a public attorney, was working in a very plush office called 30 Rockefeller Plaza, which was quite an expensive place to work for a one-man band doing pro bono work. But Jonathan Marks worked there. But also another company that worked in that very same building was a company called Donovan, Newton and Irvin, which was basically the CIA's law firm. It was run by and set up by, would you believe, Wild Bill Donovan, the man who set up the CIA. That was his law firm, and it was awash with CIA spies and spooks, some current, some old. William Colby, the very same CIA director from the Watergate hearings, he was actually a member. He worked at that firm for Newton. Now, what's really interesting about that firm is a man called David Suggs, who worked at that firm in 30 Rockefeller Plaza, went to work for Jonathan Mark Chapman's attorney. How cozy. So what you've got there is a link with a CIA law firm and Mark Chapman's attorney. Because I was always wondering how these nefarious characters I'm about to tell you about got into Mark Chapman's cell when they came from Mark Chapman's defense. And then when I found out about this David Suggs and about the CIA law firm he worked for and the fact that Jonathan Marks was in the same building, it was all very cozy. Now, I'm not saying that Suggs and Marks did anything untoward. They might have just been suggested to use these people I'm about to tell you about, and they put them in Mark's cell unknowingly, knowing what they might do to Mark. But you do have to ask questions, don't you? So the first guy who bowls into Mark's cell to analyze him, to assess him, was a hypnotist that Jonathan Marks decided to tell the world about in the New York Post. I'm going to get Mark Chapman hypnotized to find out what's going on in his mind. He actually, it was a front page news headline story. But this guy's name, this is what's going to blow your mind now. Let's go back to MK Ultra quickly. I'm sure most of your listeners and viewers know MK Ultra was a CIA program that was multifaceted. There was operations left, right, and center. It went on for decades. It was all about mind control. It was about using psychedelic drugs. It was about getting truth serums. There was hundreds of offshoots, but it was basically one of the main core elements of MK Ultra was to try and create a Manchurian candidate who could kill somebody and not realize they were killing them and forget why they killed them after they killed them. So that was a big thing. And the guy that actually was hired by the CIA to head up the Manchurian Candidate Assassin MK Ultra program was a guy called Milton Kline. Now, we know this because in 1979, Milton Kline went on a documentary, which you can find on my YouTube channel. There's a clip on there where he basically boasts that he can create a Manchurian candidate in a matter of months to kill somebody nefariously for the CIA, which he said he was a consultant for. Milton Kline was the first hypnotist that was put into Mark Chapman's cell by Jonathan Marks. Milton Kline got unfettered access to Mark Chapman. Not only that, Bernard Diamond, the nefarious hypnotist who was working on Sirhan and the RFK case, he waltzes in to Mark Chapman's cell. Yes, unfettered, unmonitored access. Richard Bloom, military intelligence background, hypnotist. He waltzes in. Now, the problem is, after Mark spent many months talking to these guys on the record, off the record, there are tapes of their recordings, but you can be absolutely certain they weren't pressing record all the time. Mark then rings up his lawyer and says, I've decided now not to plead innocent. I don't want an insanity innocent plea. I'm going to plead guilty. I've decided there's going to be no trial. I'm going to plead guilty. And they said to him, why, Mark? Why are you pleading guilty? He said, well, a little voice inside my head. This is what we were told years ago. A little voice inside my head, I think it was God, said to me, plead guilty. Right? Now, I found out through my research that one of the things that Milton Kline was trying to implant in Mark's mind, because he's actually, Jim Gaines, our Council of Foreign Relations journalist, revealed this in his 87 articles. Milton Kline talked to Mark about a little people kingdom that Mark had in his head. This only came from Milton Kline. Milton Kline was very keen to talk to Mark about a little people kingdom. Half the kingdom were the devil's forces, half the kingdom were God's forces. And Mark and Milton talked about this. None of Mark's friends and family have ever talked about this little kingdom people thing before. This only came from Milton Kline's visits to Mark. And I've discovered now through Mark's appeal in the mid-80s that it wasn't just a little voice in God whispering in Mark's ear to plead guilty. It was actually, what happened was, this is what Mark thought he saw in his cell. He saw a battle between the little people of God and the little people of devil, having a battle on Mark's cell floor. The God's little people won the battle, won the war, and God's general got up into Mark's palm, and God's general from the little people whispered into Mark's ear, plead guilty. And this is the exact little people scenario BS that Milton Kline and Milton Kline only was discussing with Mark Chapman, the CIA Manchurian candidate. He was obviously sent in there to get Mark to plead guilty through some BS reason and make sure that everything I've just told you for the last 2.5 hours about the forensics and the witness statements and the medical never came out in a court of law. Because if it did, it would have been thrown out. It would have been thrown out.
Yeah,
can you believe that?
Yeah, I can.
Next, we have a clip from Ryan Cristian on Elon Musk in regards to Twitter, X, and WeChat.
Let's talk about Twitter, as I think this is a central role. Now, what I was thinking the other day about why I stay so focused on some stories, and I trust my gut. I always do. Doesn't mean I'm always right, but people are trying to get me to focus on other stories about 1, 2, 3 months into COVID-19. Possibly the biggest story I've ever seen, and we're still covering that. Clearly, we were right to keep on it after we all started seeing it continue to be covered after a year, 2 years. The point was I was sticking with it because something told me it was important, obviously, but same with the transgender conversation. There's clear, and I think we're beginning to develop into seeing just how clearly insidious this is. And I think it's going to go beyond the transgender discussion. I think this was more of a, like, that's going to fade out. It's going to be more, the bigger conversation or whatever nefarious thing is behind it. But the same thing on all this. Remember the Twitter conversation when I've been really covering this weird evolution of Twitter and Elon and Twitter files. And plenty of people thought I was just obsessing over Twitter, or I was mad about certain things, whatever their personal childish perspective was. But I sensed something in this conversation, as I think we're now beginning to see really flesh out. And it wasn't unique. I mean, a lot of people saw the connective points to all of this, right? Actually, thinking of that, let me grab a video really quickly that I almost forgot about. But I think it's important that we continue. Here we go. Let's do this. Nope. I'll play that as we go forward. Oh, no, it's the wrong one. Dang it. 1 second. No, not that one either. Apologize, guys. Hold on. Shoot. There we go. Okay, found it. Sorry for the delay. I want to make sure I didn't lose that. I want to make sure we play this video because it's a good part to kind of encapsulate where we're going with this. But my point in all of this is that ultimately Twitter there's something to this. There's a bigger story here than just Elon and Twitter and blue checks and all the BS that gets focused on with a two-party paradigm. There's a real obvious connection between the Great Reset, Neuralink, I mean, even foreign policy. Like there's a clear connection to this story. And I'm glad that I've continued to follow on it because I think today we're really seeing something connect that really does scare me. Now, first of all, I wanted to point out this is just one, but it hasn't stopped. Like I've seen it get much worse. Another individual was censored. Blunts for Jesus is an account on Twitter that just got suspended, who makes informative music videos about historical events, powerful figures, government media propaganda. Of course, he's covered Operation Northwoods, people like Darpa, Gates, Musk, all of them. Now you follow him right now at 2 stone to go home. But this was recently censored. Now it says, don't let X censor researchers like Blunts for Jesus. Don't let them dictate what people can see. Either way, it was censored. Now, I'm not sure exactly what. I know he just posted some video about Building 6 in regard to like 9/11 or World Trade Center Building 6. But I'm not sure exactly what it was. But it's still happening. I just want to point that out. There's still people right now that are actively being removed from Twitter for apparently not even like a justifiable reason. There's not some kind of violation of terms, just quietly removed. Still happening. But this brings us to the conversation of what they're now doing. We've been telling you this has been coming. Remember, we talked about the WeChat conversation, which, of course, people said was fake news. Conspiracy theory, they said. Even people, especially the right-wing sycophants that were all screaming that Elon Musk is saving free speech as he's literally openly attacking free speech just because they got promoted and made some money, right? It's just people will always, people don't want to bite the hand that feeds them, right? People will not challenge things that their paycheck depends on not challenging. That's how this game works. But we told you, he even said it. This is about the everything app, right? The idea, which is digital ID, which is social credit. That's where this all goes. The everything app where you have banking and overlapping and paying your bills and grocery shopping and everything, which can then be turned off should you not meet terms of service. Even that is the most early way you can look at that. But then it can become, oh, well, you didn't do the right thing. And we're going to get more into this at the end of the show, which is about bank accounts being shut down. But as Orwell points out, here's WeChat, as we promised, and here's Linda Yaccarino. It's an exceptionally rare thing in life or in business that you get a second chance to make another big impression. Twitter made one massive impression and changed the way we communicate. Now, X, which as you can see is now literally what this is, X, we'll get into what that is. Now, X will go further, transforming the global town square, which is what we've all been concerned about, those of us that care, right? The town square, which will then justify censorship, will justify regulation by the government, which is always where this has been going. X is the future state of unlimited interactivity, centered in audio, video, messaging, payments, banking, creating a global marketplace for ideas, goods, services, opportunities. Powered by AI, of course, X will connect us in all ways. Yes, we're just beginning to imagine. This is the central part of where this goes. I can't believe people haven't been able to see this. For years, fans and critics alike have pushed Twitter to dream bigger, to innovate faster. You see where this is going. We've already started to see X take shape over the last 8 months. So this has been always the plan. There's absolutely no limit to this transformation. X will be the platform that can deliver, everything. Elon and I are looking forward to working with our teams and every single one of you to bring into this world. To bring X to the world. Well, Decensored News points something very interesting out. Looks like a clear win for Sparkling Ruby, as it seems that Elon put something out saying, well, if there is a good enough logo is posted tonight, we'll make go live worldwide tomorrow. Interesting, right? Well, she put up, said, hey, what about this? XAI, which actually comes from Darpa, which stands for Explainable Artificial Intelligence. She posted this before this happened. It's right there. July 22nd. Can I win? Right? Well, then it goes forward and look at that. Sure enough, without an acknowledgement that she posted that, she either knew something, right? That's what it's called now. XAI. She either knew something or he took her idea and didn't credit her for it. Isn't that interesting? Well, look, this is announcing formation of XAI to understand reality. Now, that's not Twitter necessarily, right? But that's what Twitter is being used for. And they're open about this, right? Just like Whitney and I have been so worried about there. And look, they haven't been secret about it. He even said this. It's not about the advertising. It's about your data. We used to all care mostly about that. Now, Elon saved the day. It's like when Trump got elected and nobody cared anymore about the things they just cared about. It's so simple. The people in the two-party paradigm are so easy to manipulate. The point is that this is using your data, your engagement, your mentality, your thought process, everything to train the algorithm, the machine learning, to possibly reach the singularity. This is all they're using you. That's potentially the entire point. And you can see the chat here, XAI discussion. Well, here's the actual page for this. Explainable artificial intelligence. Here's what it says. And now this looks like, I didn't find the exact date. This says full phase 1 will be expected November 2018. So at the very least, this is pre-2018. It says, this dramatic success in machine learning has led to, now I'm not saying we can prove this is the same thing, but I find it really interesting that not only do they use the exact same acronym, but that he's working with DARPA for Neuralink. Like, I just find this almost too much. Machine learning has led to a torrent of artificial intelligence, produce autonomous systems that will perceive, learn, decide, and act on their own. I mean, isn't that what they're all doing? The Department of Defense is facing challenges that demand more intelligent, autonomous, and symbiotic systems. Well, what's Neuralink? Right? That's the machine-brain interface. That's the symbiotic concept, or autonomous meaning something that can operate on its own, whether AI or just like an autonomous robot. All of this is, they're building towards an artificial symbiotic, which that's the biological overlap, artificial intelligence, and using machine learning, using you to reach it. These models will be combined with state-of-the-art human-computer interface techniques. What a coincidence if this isn't exactly what they're doing, right? It's pretty shocking. XAI is one of a handful of current DARPA programs expected to enable third-wave AI systems, where machines understand the context and environment in which they operate. Sentience, essentially, to some degree, and over time build underlying explanatory models that allow them to characterize real-world phenomena. At the end of the program, the final delivery will be a toolkit library consisting of machine learning and human-computer interface software modules that could be used to develop future explainable AI systems. After the program is complete, these toolkits would be available for further refinement and transition into defense or commercial applications. Now, look, the point is, the only way that we get to this point is the evolution of where this is going. Whether that's some kind of input, some Neuralink overlap, some chip, some kind of, some way to or where it's going with Meta or some Twitter alternative to where you're tapping in, you're kind of in some way plugging in to the system, not just typing on a phone. And this is, but even just without that, even just your input is machine learning is training this across your conversations, the meshing of individual content. That's concerning. So ask yourself, why exactly this? Well, going forward, here's what Linda says. X is the future state of unlimited activity. Oh, I just read that. We'll connect us. And it's very concerning to me that this isn't. What is that? Well, how can she get this right beforehand? And no one's talking about this. Very weird to me. Well, let's listen to what he actually had to say about this. He was asked by, I think it was an individual from Saudi Arabia at a World Economic Forum summit about this exact process. Spiro points this out at the World Government Summit, which is World Economic Forum 2023, explaining his purchase of Twitter back when he got it, right in the beginning, telling you it was meant to accelerate X, the everything app. It's funny how this wasn't a secret, but people still acted like this was fake. A key objective is to verify as many people as possible. Now, don't forget, that's not what's happening right now. Right now, as far as there's people that have already signed up will tell you, at least for me, all I needed was my telephone number, which is already connected from a long time ago. So I didn't need to do anything. But it's going beyond that. That's the whole point, because that right now you could be anonymous with what you still have on Twitter. But with where they're going to be going, whether biometric data, who knows? They're removing anonymity, and that's the last thing we should want. And identity layer of the internet, like a digital ID. That's what this will be. Here's what he's saying.
Twitter, if we say 5 years down the road, what's your vision for this platform? What should it do?
Well, I think it'd be, I'd like to, have this sort of long-term vision for something called X.com from way back in the day, which is kind of like a sort of like an everything app, where it's just maximally useful. It does, payments, it does, so it provides financial services, provides information flow, really anything digital, and also provides secure communications. So really I think be as useful as possible, as entertaining as possible, and also to be like a source of truth. Like if you want to find out what's going on and what's really going on, then you should be able to go on X, the X app, and find out. So it's a sort of a source of truth and a maximally useful, I guess app is about the wrong word, but system. And Twitter is essentially an accelerant to that sort of maximally useful everything app. I think trying to have as many organizations and people and institutions verified as being legitimately those people and organizations is important. And to have the organizational affiliation clearly identified, so that if you want to find out if somebody's actually, if an account is actually, say, from a member of parliament or a journalist, or if a, let's say, if a Twitter handle is actually belongs to, say, Disney Corporation or something like that, you can go on Twitter, and it's sort of an identity layer of the internet, and you can.
See, the problem for me is that I totally get the need or the desire to want to verify people who are presenting themselves as a position of authority. Like today, that we all know that makes sense, but it should always, no matter what, be optional, even for those people, because then so if you don't have it, the person, if you are a discerning adult, which is the point, you don't need to continue to coddle people because they get more stupid and more reliant, which is the entire point. That's why it's happening. But instead, err on the side of giving them more freedom, which just says, look, if they're not verified, then they could be anybody. Just because it says AOC, you should know, if you don't see whatever we use for the verification, then you can assume that it might not be her. Why is that not acceptable to everybody? Right? So you're a president, you're a member of the government. Well, then you can verify yourself and you can have whatever little thing says that you're part of the government. Everybody else, there shouldn't be some version of this process for the average person, because all it does is differentiate people and layer and tiers, and that's what they want.
Confirm that is in fact the case. And I think once you've got these sort of interlocking sort of identities, it's actually very hard to be deceptive in that case, because,
which again, you have a right to be. See, this is the interesting part about this. In the technological world, it's gotten a lot more complex to understand this, but the idea being that you have every right to pretend to be somebody else. You have a right to lie or to be wrong. But you see, when we get into the idea that you don't have a right to deceive, well, how do you know I meant to do that? Maybe I actually thought what I was doing, because all of this infringes on free speech. The point is, you put the onus on the individual. It's your responsibility to check your own information. If you don't, well, that's on you. It's not anybody else's responsibility to make sure you're not too stupid to get tricked.
And it's also, you have a reputation to protect at that point. So I think then people are far more likely to be measured in their response, and be more reasonable, since they have reputational value at that point.
Right. So also training, right? So you'll be more reasonable if you know that people know who you are. What's that called, guys? Social engineering. On the surface. It's very simple. Well, here's another video going back to when this is earlier on, before he made PayPal, or actually right after. I think it's discussing how he made this, showing you that this has always been the plan. He mentioned it, the X.com discussion. This was a long time ago, well before he got to Twitter, and this seems to have always been the point.
This is an ATM. What we're going to do is transform the traditional banking industry. I do not fit the picture of a banker.
X.com, this is Julie.
Raising $50 million is a matter of making a series of phone calls, and the money is there.
X.com became PayPal. Right. Okay, so X.com was originally designed and then just became PayPal. Do we all trust PayPal? I mean, that's Elon Musk too, right? But PayPal is like the devil, the enemy. Well, like one of the most obvious examples. I mean, they stole money, thousands of dollars from me. I never got back. Just deleted me for no reason. Or they argued misinformation about something that I've now been proven to be correct on. Same with Patreon. Do you realize that was about myocarditis? Yeah, how's that going, Patreon? You utter failures, and you're still pretending like I'm wrong. But we all know that's not true. You'll never reevaluate that, because then you'll have to admit and give back the money you took, both of them. But of course, no, it's not going to happen. But realize that is what became PayPal. And now X.com is what Twitter was. Full circle. Here we are. Well, but we can trust it though, right? Because Elon's saving free speech.
I've sunk the great majority of my net worth into X.com, which is the new banking and mutual funds company on the internet that I've started.
Big X.
Exactly. X.com.
I think X.com could absolutely be a multi-billion-dollar bonanza, because if you look at the industry that X is pursuing, it's the biggest sector of the world economy.
There's a lot of great things that are going to come out. Obviously, payments down the road, maybe later this year, and improving the direct message stuff. Obviously, obviously enabling full encryption and video and voice calls, and just basically solving, like basically, if there's something you want to do, you can do it on this sort of X everything app, or you can leave easily and do it somewhere else. Essentially, if done right, the X would serve people's financial needs to such a degree that over time it would become, I don't know, maybe half of the global financial system.
Wow.
Or some big number.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the number is, but pretty big. So it would be by far the biggest sort of financial institution. But like I said, not really in the way that people are used to thinking about banks.
Mm-hmm.
Just the most efficient database for the thing that is money. Like I said, like least amount of fraud. Everything's real time. And if it involves money in any way, it can be dealt with seamlessly on one location. And then in addition, you've got the sort of social media element, which is also information. It's people sharing information of various kinds, whether it's text, video, pictures, voice, and so so both money and what we call social media are really information exchange. And I think there's potential there to make a product that is really quite compelling, that combines all these things, simplifies people's lives, is more, cost efficient for the average person.
Mm-hmm.
So, you don't have a minimum number of fees and whatnot. So, I think there's just a lot of potential to create some, like the ultimate app or system, website, whatever.
What you've got going on with the internet is it's basically like an earthquake where the epicenter is Silicon Valley, and it's.
So I think there's just a lot of potential.
So this right
to
here,
create some, like
the whole last half of this video, what impression does that give you? It's an all opinion. It's as always, nobody should ever be like, he means this or he feels that way, because that makes you pretty much as stupid as corporate media. The point is, though, what impression does it give you in that last second half? For me personally, it's that it's like he doesn't know what he's supposed to be saying, right? Where if I had to guess, and maybe this is just me projecting what I think is happening, but ultimately in his mind, this is a lot bigger than he's supposed to be talking about, right? So he arguably would know that this is a bigger idea that connects to us, like earth-shattering ideas. Potentially, if you want to get into some bigger topics that I'm not even going to touch on, like whether or not this is something that goes way beyond what we even understand, that there's some kind of elitist understanding of, 12,000 cycle Earth issues, polar, South Pole, North Pole shifting, and all these different, there's lots of theories about historical Earth issues, and then potentially the people in power know these things. That's why you got Bezos building massive bunkers in the mountains near his own launch sites, and he's making potential rockets to Mars. And, it's like, what do they know that we don't, right? The point is that there's something bigger going on here, possibly. And to me, what he's saying is kind of like, just like he's trying to, how do I say this in a very, benign way, data and, money and everything app and stuff. And, Twitter and messages. And like, it's just like, he's just rambling. That's what I got from it, but I could be wrong. To me, it seems like he's trying to give you the basic ground floor without giving away more. That's what it kind of felt like to me. On that note, it's an interesting choice, right? What is the X at? What does X symbolize usually, right? Well, 10 Roman numerals. That doesn't really have any clear meaning unless there's something to you, but it says the X symbol has diverse meanings, including representing the unknown, secrecy, danger, the end of times, I guess. None of it really seems to be positive. So it's an interesting choice. Then we also have him here telling you that this is always what it was going to be, right? It's all about the everything, just like WeChat, just like China. We're just going to model ourselves after China. Isn't that exactly what everybody wants and what everyone continues to say? Like, it's embarrassing that whether Trump or Biden or Elon, they all say bad guy and China is doing bad things for the most part, but then actively do everything they can to emulate everything they're doing.
Working on an edit button for a year.
Well, it's a tricky situation. And it's incredibly complex.
Yeah, it's a good one, indeed. I mean, we don't even have an app that's as good as WeChat in China.
And like in China, you can like live on WeChat basically. It's like
and then they can also just turn it off if you don't have a good social credit score. That's a real thing.
Yeah, everyone's like, like you live on WeChat, you do payments, you do everything. It's like, it's great. Basically, WeChat's kick ass. And we don't have anything like WeChat outside of China. So I was like, my idea would be like, how about if we just copy WeChat? Hey, copy them.
Buys Twitter, copies WeChat.
Yeah, pretty much.
Nice. Right? This is concerning for anybody that cares. Now, Slow News Day also points out, let's read this tweet first. This says, Joe Biden isn't happy with the lack of support from Elon Musk and suggests that he could be investigated if he hasn't done anything wrong, even if he hasn't done anything wrong. Now, to me, this seems wildly hollow. Think about how dumb it is. Well, first of all, this says it's a cut clip from a press conference on 2022. Of course. Now, this wasn't even the point, by the way. This was the passing point. But just there are so many of these people online that are just actively, and by the way, it doesn't mean I'm blindly trusting this context either, because Twitter's wrong about this stuff all the time. But multiple kind of unconnected points. There's a lot of these kind of people, Ian Miles Chong being one of them. They'll just regurgitate things they see, videos from 2 years ago without making it clear it's an old video and act like you're supposed. It's just people are there. There's a lot of open manipulation, which they have a right to do. It's free speech, but you also have the right to be smart and to educate yourself and to steel yourself against these kind of people and don't be Twitter filed, which is what that is. When I say you've been Twitter filed, it means that you decided to go along with the screenshot or something you haven't proven and retweet it and talk about it, even though you don't know it's real, because that's what the Twitter files did to everybody. Made you start pretending you could look at a screenshot of something and go, I knew it, even though you don't have source material in front of you. But nonetheless, the point was, he's basically saying, I'll investigate Elon, even if he has done anything wrong. Why would you say that? Because you want it to look like you're going to go after him when clearly that's a clumsy effort, in my opinion. But Empire of Lies points out, before Elon bought it, the Dem Party, FBI, CIA had Twitter under control. They could block out the Hunter Biden story and many other things. Now that they can't control it, they want to ruin Elon Musk and anyone who defies them. My God. As Slow News Day says, and I'm inclined to agree, this is a wild piece of fiction, but it's probably going to dupe people into thinking the guy who's subsidized by Darpa and wants to turn Twitter into WeChat is your friend. Yes, the brain chip AI guy. It's just so sad. This is the two-party illusion, breaking logic. Right, because now they don't have control and they're fighting Elon. It's like, my God. I mean, maybe. I could be wrong. But look at the connections. The guy is literally a military contractor. It's really, really uninformed to think that there's some kind of back. I mean, it's makes me sad. But there are people that believe this stuff. Now, a few other points on Twitter in general. Realize that Twitter has been propping up people like Andrew Tate and plenty of others who are not what they appear to be. And I've been saying this for a long time. Quite frankly, I don't think Tate's even worth our time. A lot of these people aren't. They don't deserve your airtime or your attention. They're ridiculous people, but they've been propped up by the paradigm, including people like Elon Musk. And I think it's really, really obvious because I keep saying, in this case, just taking it from the perspective of the two-party illusion, the establishment, and what they want people to think the right is. And there are a lot of people that actually exist who watch him, or people that watch Jersey Shore and go, yeah, those people are awesome. I want to be just like them. It's that kind of illusion. Like, you want to be like those people because you're a POS, right? The point is there are people that really want to be like Andrew Tate who think he's the smartest guy ever. And those people deserve each other. But the point is that they raise those people up to say this is what they, just like on the left, right? They raise up the most loony, the people with just full of lunacy, ridiculous people that think that we can go off forever. The point is they do that. So the other side, maybe the honest ones, think that's what they're fighting. The point is that Twitter has been propping a lot of these people up. Now, I wanted to include this. I'm not going to get into it. This is an hour-long video. Milk Bar TV did the one before that was shorter. It was really well done, but this is just completely breaking it down. If you care about what this person really is, watch this. It's not up for debate. And I've been saying this from the very beginning. Milk Bar TV really did and he rightly so is getting some pretty good recognition for this because his video was making the rounds on like very high level shows on left and right, all over the place, because it seems everybody that cares wants to show the truth. You got the left side of this that cares because they want to make the right guy look bad. You got the right side of it that cares because they care about the truth. And whatever the reasoning is, it's getting through because this guy is a dangerous, bad person who's being propped up. And it seems that Tucker Carlson has only doubled down. He got used and possibly on purpose. Maybe he knew that. I don't know. But also, Here's one of the other examples of somebody that appears to be propped up by this entire scam that looks like it's being used against us. But this is the Narwhal or Mario Narfall individual who I pointed out has been kind of just being used and propping up as like the independent journalist, industry, when all they're doing is just parroting corporate talking points. It's really sad. But this person, Frank, points this out. Breaking, want to make over $1 million per year through Twitter Spaces by defrauding companies. Here, teach you how. Fake your audience numbers, scam your customers through Twitter, try to hide it all. Now, you can go through and look at all this. A lot of this is things he states as his opinion, but a lot of it, though, there's different images and examples, and he seems to show pretty clearly that a lot of these people they're using, a lot of these different bots and accounts that always seem to tune in, it's hard not to see this as a complete, like the NFT overlap with the images and the kind of people they're using. And he blocked me for a minute, too. It looks like he unblocked me, but because I called out what he was doing. But the point is, as you go through all this, it's kind of hard not to see that being investigated by the SEC, these people are concerning at the very least, that they're being propped up in ways that are using this, like with bots, manipulative tactics, and they seem to be okay with that. Now, read through it for yourself. The point is not to go off about who this person is. This is small news in the bigger picture, but I think there's a lot of this happening. This person's tracking the bots of Mario Narfall. Elon Musk hates bots, but he loves Mario. Mario employed Win Solutions to bot his tweets so we can charge clients more through IBC. One tweet saw a 60% plus bot reply ratio. Like, can you go it's not hard to see this stuff is manipulative tactics. And he points out here, it says mainstream media's assault on citizen journalism. See how this works? It's like with Andrew Tate, same thing, where when you realize that you're going to get accountable potentially, well, you rise up and act like it's all fake. It's the Matrix trying to frame me, which of course is possible, and we should always consider that. But then when you start to see all the evidence, you realize, oh, okay, so this is a guy trying to use your suspicion of the government against you. In the case of Andrew Tate. Well, here's another example where suddenly this guy has been trying to frame himself as the budding new independent journalism industry on Twitter, who really continues to just parrot what the corp media is saying. And, in these Twitter spaces, the point is that now that he is being investigated for other things, he goes, oh, well, they're coming after me because journalism, or he's breaking law. But, the people that want to defend him and Twitter and Elon Musk jump to their defense, just like with the other guy. I just think this is interesting. So be skeptical. Now, here's the interesting last part of this. Here's what Mario said about the X app. What is X? What can you expect? I mean, is this guy like a representative of Twitter? I'm not sure why he'll come out and he says, look, calling a post a tweet has now been replaced with X. Where's this coming from? I don't know why. I think we're going to probably just keep calling it Twitter because this is what we're used to. But Musk and his tweet team were the first to get the new logo rolled out to users in progress. The most imminent updates. Eligible creator revenue share is coming for all creator soon for all creators across. Eligible creator revenue share is coming soon for all creators across the global town square. I don't know if that means eligible, meaning again, that you can have some kind of loophole where. I'm still right now in this weird limbo where none of it matters to me. I'm willing to bet I'll still be there. Elon has said the term followers will change to viewers. And these are all just themes that you use. So I don't know where they get to change these things. Bookmark features will be updated. Video live streaming is something we can expect soon, which is already happening. Easy scam and phishing reporting features, blah, blah, blah. Twitter default for the X app will be the dark. Shadow bans are a Twitter issue, apparently says, but Elon Musk confirmed X will show shadow bans directly on the profile. So that will mean it's not a shadow ban then. I'm not sure what this means because right now that's still happening. People are absolutely, myself included, by the way, I keep proving this. Well, I'll have a video that has more views than anything on the topic, and you search for that exact topic and I'm not listed. Or I'll search for my name and it won't pop up, or I'll search for Robert Inlakesh's name and he won't pop up no matter what. Very clear. Speculation around Dogecoin, like whether they're going to use crypto in the payment processing system. So that's interesting, which I guarantee it's going to overlap the same CBDC interface kind of discussion. But it's going in regard to Linda Yaccarino. X will go further than any other app in terms of what social media can do for its global town square. Yeah, the everything app. X will have audio, video, messaging, blah, blah, blah. X will be a marketplace for goods and services. X will be powered by AI to connect everyone in new ways. Isn't this exact? Like if this was Klaus Schwab telling you all this, wouldn't you be concerned? Yes. Same reason. X will be an everything platform. He says, my thoughts. It's crazy to think that a few weeks ago, people were debating Meta's clone. X Corp may have many steps ahead of building everything out. I'm just kind of skimming through it, getting to the points. Elon's vision is unfolding live for us to see. Not all features will work, but Twitter was a dying company, desperate for a new vision. What excites me most is what's to come, the integrations with X, AI, and Neuralink. So apparently that's an open conversation that Neuralink is going to integrate with Twitter. That terrifies me. Neuralink is an implantable human-to-computer interface, so it allows impulses from nerves to control functions. As the technology progresses, it will allow direct control of X, AI embedded in X, and apparently connected to you. Imagine the ability to think of a command, transmit it to X, and let the app take it from there. Let me know your thoughts. Terror. That's crazy. Well, interesting timing, seeing as how on the 24th, WorldCoin just launched. What an interesting time overlap. Right. Well, Derek already wrote about this. Sam Altman, Artificial Intelligence, the Bilderberg Group, and WorldCoin. Right. This is a coin that literally, I don't know how they're going to make this happen. I feel like they're going to have to adapt this to some online version, but apparently right now, the only way to get this is if you scan your iris with this orb. Or one of them. I think there's only one, but I get the idea being that you have to scan your irises in person. It says it very explicitly. And then you get crypto that you can use. This is called WorldCoin, guys. This is important in a dangerous way. It's tied in with everything we're talking about.
Now let's jump to this clip from James Corbett and James Evan Pilato with this New World Next Week episode.
Welcome back to New World Next Week. I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And I'm James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com. Decisions to close accounts are not taken lightly. We've got that story, plus the digital likeness of Bruce Willis has joined the actor strike in New Mexico. But first, they're announcing them aliens in congressional hearings. Sinead O'Connor's died suddenly. Kevin Spacey won his latest rape trial on his birthday. Mitch McConnell maybe had a stroke live on TV, and the Federal Reserve has jacked up interest rates to the highest levels not seen since those heady days of post-9/11. And all the while, James, the Rockefeller plan for most favored nation seems to move forward. Xi Jinping meets Henry Kissinger. It's like the worst Abbott and Costello movie ever. Chinese President Xi Jinping met with former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger at the State Guest House in Beijing last Thursday. Xi noted that Dr. Kissinger had recently celebrated his 100th birthday and has paid more than 100 visits to China over the years. These two 100s give this visit special significance. They love their numerology, but don't try that sorcery as a plebe. She said, like Reagan and the astrologers and all that stuff. She said that 52 years ago, when China and the United States were at a crucial inflection point, Mao, Nixon, and Dr. Kissinger, with their extraordinary strategic vision, made the right decision for China-U.S. cooperation and launched the process of normalizing the China-U.S. relationship. The decision delivered benefits to the two countries and changed the world. She emphasized that the world now is undergoing momentous transformations unseen in a century, and the international landscape is going through major shifts. Quote, China and the United States have once again come to a crossroads which requires another decision by the two sides about where to go from here, end quote. Kissinger stressed that the U.S.-China relationship is essential to peace and prosperity of the two countries and the wider world. Kissinger said, under the current circumstances, it is imperative to maintain the principles established by the Shanghai Communique, appreciate to the utmost importance China attaches to the One China principle, and move the relationship in a positive direction. That is extraordinary strategic vision. Eh, James?
It's extraordinary something. And if you want the image of 3D chess, this is the perfect image of it. Kissinger sitting there with Zhou Enlai in 1971 on his secret trip preceding Nixon's trip in 72. And then it cut to flash forward to sitting there next to Xi Jinping in 2023. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. And this is the thing that I think people have the hard time wrapping their heads around, because 3D chess is a complicated game. it does not mean that there is not actual rivalry and nation-state-driven ideologues within the different nations on the 3D chessboard who are acting in what they believe in their national interests and blah, 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 with real conflict going on between them. But are they the ones making the decisions? Who are the ones really making the decisions, and what's really going on behind the scenes? So I guess there's a few different ways we can approach this, one of which is to note, as CNN does at the bottom of their article on this, the difference between the Anthony Blinken U.S. government diplomacy that was taking place with Xi last month versus the Kissinger meeting. They say during his meeting with Blinken in June, Xi was positioned at the head of a table where the rest of the two delegations, including Blinken, sat facing each other on either side. On Thursday, Xi and Kissinger were seated on the same level, across a small tea table in a much more cordial setting. The two meetings are very different, Wu said, the person they're quoting in this article. The Chinese are very skilled in shaping the narrative and optics. So there's a sense of there's some sort of, formal meeting about geopolitics, and then there's the meeting of friends across a tea table. And who's making the real wheeling and dealing? Well, that's a question that came up explicitly in one of the articles I was reading by one of these so-called independent alternative people who suspiciously never have anything bad to say about China or Russia, who was rhetorically asking, what was Kissinger's secret trip to China all about? And then the entire article studiously avoids that question and concentrates on some of the bellicose warmongering amongst the U.S. neocon neolib factions against China. Yeah, of course, there is warmongering and that kind of talk. And there are also secret negotiations taking place behind the scenes with the deep state. Oh, and who else visited Xi in Beijing earlier this year? Bill Gates. Right. Bill Gates and Xi Jinping had a nice cozy one-on-one a few months ago. So that's the type of negotiations that are going on outside of the realm of the bellicose warmongering spectacle diplomacy that we see out front. So anyway, I'm just reminding the audience for the millionth time, it's a big club. You ain't in it, and none of these teams are really on your side in this big game of geopolitical chess. If you want more on that, I'd direct your attention to not only my How to Play 3D Chess article from a year or two ago, but also I just wrote a couple of articles on the 2D geopolitical chessboard about the pawns in the game, essentially, and how they are used. So I'll direct people's attention to those articles. But long story short, there are deep state ties between the U.S. and China. And what we are seeing is the 21st century equivalent of what Anthony Sutton was writing about in the 20th century with the Soviet boogeyman.
James, I guess Mao is dead, so, Bill Gates, we kind of swap in Bill Gates in place of Chairman Mao. That works out pretty well. I just remembered I didn't initially have it in the notes. A follow-up update from last week's New World Next Week episode. Putin ain't going to that BRICS meeting next month, James, in Johannesburg. They've announced he's not going to go. Because, again, as I joked last week, he worries he would be arrested like Kissinger would if he went to any number of countries around the world. That's how we get going on New World Next Week, episode 524. So, James, since they're not very good at the debunk, knocking us off the platforms, can't actually engage in necessarily a war of truth and facts, they're going to go for the debank instead. UK watchdog steps into row over debanking of Nigel Farage. Britain's financial watchdog has stepped into the row, that is Brit speak for the fight, over the closure of former Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage's bank accounts after Farage claimed that NatWest's private bank Coutts, is it pronounced Coutts? Coutts? Coutts is pretty funny here, at least in the States.
It's Coutts. The Alberta border crossing is called Coutts, so I'm going to say Coutts.
I like saying Coutts. Farage claimed NatWest private bank Coutts had sought to cut him off on political grounds. Nigel Farage said he obtained a 40-page document from Coutts after filing a subject access request with the bank to learn more about its rationale for proposing to shut down the accounts. NatWest's treatment of Farage drew criticism from several government ministers, while Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said the government was tightening rules around account closures. The Financial Conduct Authority is talking to NatWest about the handling of Farage's accounts. The regulator's CEO told the lawmakers, adding existing rules made clear that banks should not discriminate on the basis of political views. A Coutts spokesperson told Reuters that its ability to respond to Farage's latest claims were restricted by obligations to protect client confidentiality. Again, you gotta love the selectively enforced rules. Decisions to close accounts are not taken lightly and take into account a number of factors, including commercial viability, how much money can we make off of them, reputational considerations, and legal and regulatory requirements, the spokesperson said. British banks are in the spotlight as the UK government has begun looking into concerns some have allegedly blacklisted certain customers over their politics. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who is, I believe, at the lowest polling levels since his run at Prime Minister, told Parliament that it wouldn't be right for banks to deny services to those exercising the right to lawful free speech. Under planned reforms, banks will have to give customers 3 months' notice of account closure. See, they'll give you a warning. What's the problem? What are you complaining about? Nigel Farage may just be the tip of the debanking iceberg. That is the long and in-depth article from capx.co, where they note the work is increasingly automated. James, all the AI coming for everybody's jobs. And technology giants, places called Refinitiv, have turned over $6 billion annually supporting these needs. Seems like basically they've automated the tabulation of your social credit scores. And all the while, who are the real criminals? Last week, the U.S. Federal Reserve fined Deutsche Bank $186 million over its insufficient anti-money laundering checks, including its monitoring systems. Again, they'll launder money for drug cartels and arms dealers and Epstein pedos, but you said on Friendster that Sandy Hook is sketchy? Oh, I'm sorry, you've been debanked. Meanwhile, James, this is part of a larger thing all going on. Bank of America recently pulled a Wells Fargo. B of A hit with $250 million in fines and refunds for double-dipping fees and fake accounts, inventing fake accounts to take money from people that are already customers. We will include links to Refinitiv, one of those firms that helps banks rank and debank you. But it's not just Farage or Alex Jones, or Kanye West. Chase Bank shuts accounts of natural health advocate Dr. Joseph Mercola refuses to say why. In a recent wave of unexpected closures, JP Morgan Chase has terminated a number of bank accounts associated with Florida-based health retailer Mercola Market, along with the personal accounts of its employees and their families. The firm's owner, Dr. Joseph Mercola, is known for his criticism of COVID-19 vaccines and promotion of natural health. ReclaimTheNet.org asked the question, James, did their social media posts lead to their bank account being shut down?
I'm going to take a probably on that one, huh? What do you think? Yeah, this is disturbing on so many levels. One of which is, okay, yes, banks have their reputational risk section, and they're always trying to studiously manage that. And, oh, we can't bank this person because they're in some shady areas. Just like they did with Epstein, right? Oh, wait. No, of course not. And people who think that that's just some sort of small or inconsequential part of the story have not been following the work of Pam and Russ Martins on Wall Street on Parade. They've been doing excellent work, article after article after article, on JP Morgan's banking links to Epstein and how there were the internal executives and compliance officers going, hey, we shouldn't be banking this guy. This is a big reputational risk. But, oh, lo and behold, you've got people sitting on corporate boards with Epstein in JP Morgan who decide to, no, I think we're going to keep his account and make sure he can withdraw his cash at any time so that he can traffic young children for the pleasure of the elitists. Yeah, great stuff. So, yeah, this is not about protecting reputational risk or anything of the sort, but that is how they're going to cloak it. And that's another disturbing aspect of this, is that, to me, what this is the turning up of the water on the boiling frog. It's we're in that spot where people are starting to notice, hey, I think this water's getting warmer. What's going on? And that is part of this. It's entering into the dialectic where now it's the negotiation. Oh, yeah, it's happening. And yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Yeah, they got it. The banks should be protecting their revenue. So how much should we do and what should we? Oh, I know. We need to get the government involved so they can pass a law that you have to have 3 months notice before they take away all your bank accounts and the bank accounts of your employees and the bank accounts of your employees' families. Absolute nonsense. No, this is one of those things where we do not negotiate. We do not enter into any kind of negotiation on this. And, oh, well, as long as they give you 3 months warning, that'll be okay. No, this is the cliff that we are diving over right now. And first they came for the forages. I mean, even that is just horrible and ridiculous. But I guess what this ultimately leads to, I do not need to explain this to our regular audience, but just to put it out on the table, what this is leading to is the complete universe, the ecosystem of different aspects of the propaganda machine that will be able to not just debank you, although that's bad enough, but really deperson you in this coming digital age in which we're already 90% of the way there. And as you alluded to earlier, it starts with the debunk. First, you get the fact checkers going, well, actually, James Corbett said this, 17 years ago, and actually, as it turns out, we've debunked that. How? Well, don't ask details. We've debunked it. So then this person X, James Corbett or whoever, he's been debunked. He's been fact checked. He's spreading misinformation, and then, of course, then it filters out into the NewsGuard and all of these filters and different things that are now starting to be installed in your browsers, and your ISPs will start taking these blacklists, and CorbettReport.com, that's a no-no site. And then once the bank picks up on this and they go, hey, we have this banking customer who has all this weirdness going on in the debunk fact-checking world, this is how it is all going to function. And so whenever you step outside the line and you post anything on your X thread or whatever the kids are using for social media these days that's out of line, you'll be thinking in the back of your head, will this get me debanked, depersoned? Will I be able to go online at all in the future if I post this? I better not post it. And the self-censorship starts. This is where we're heading, and I don't think people have to use much of an imagination to see where it's going. So, to me, this is one of those lines in the sand thing. Like I said with the Freedom Convoy debanking hundreds of people for engaging in peaceful protest, they just they took a flying leap across this bright red line in the sand. We cannot allow this to stand. This is insanity, and anyone who will bank with any sort of bank that has shown that they will do this to their customers is part of the problem. By their participation in that bank, they are contributing to the problem.
Cannabis can't work with big banks here in the States, even though marijuana is de facto legal in most of the country now. The big banks can't do it because Daddy Fed says, oh, no, that's a reputational risk. That's a big problem. James, it's like we're all basically going to be casualties in the learn to code wars. And as you were already just referring to, they came for the Nigel Farages. I didn't care. They're crazy conspiracy theorists. We're going to be casualties of the learn to code wars. And what I mean by that is, I don't care if Hollywood goes on strike because they laughed at me for being a dirty coal miner that should learn to code. Snowpiercer cast unknowingly scanned for AI use, Star confirms. Grabbing this from nerdbot.com. One of the many legitimate reasons SAG-AFTRA is striking, that's the Screen Actors Guild, that's the Hollywood strike, is due to the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, AMPTP, demanding actors allow productions to do full body scans of performers. It's not just the scans, it's the fact that the actors would only be paid a day's wages to be scanned. Those results would then be the property of the production for the rest of eternity, with the actor never receiving compensation for the use of their likeness. SAG president and co-star of This Is Spinal Tap, because we are in far satirical realms here, James, Fran Drescher addressed the public in a pretty big, rousing press conference announcing the strike. This has been 2 weeks ago. They touched on the scanning proposal from AMPTP, which was news to many. It was news to me. Like I said, that was about 2 weeks ago exactly. Now, Tony Award winner and Grammy nominee Lena Hall, who stars in TNT's TV show Snowpiercer. Now, I have actually joked about this bit of cli-fi, climate fiction, for years. It's the one where in the future where geoengineering, doesn't work and goes wrong and the Earth becomes a Hoth-like ice planet. And then the survivors ride around on a train forever and ever for some reason. Spoiler. Lena Hall, who stars in TNT's Snowpiercer, has confirmed she and other series regulars did full body scan and full range of emotion capture for season 4 without being told the real reason why. This is the first confirmation we've gotten so far that the practice was already going into effect. She also clarifies in the comments that they told us it was for special effects, but were very vague. Using computer-generated versions of celebrities is far from a new debate. There's even an episode of Black Mirror of countless sci-fi and horror properties revolving around the subject. While this tech may be great for a situation like allowing the late Carrie Fisher to posthumously continue her role as Princess Leia, or to de-age actors like they just did with great-grandpa Indiana Jones. These scans applications can become sinister, especially in cases like Lena Hall, where consent was not given for perpetual use, as far as we know. The Flash movie recently used a generated version of the late Christopher Reeve's Superman. Because Reeve passed away in 2004, he probably didn't consent to this. To demand all performers give up their likeness with seemingly no to little stipulations about how it can be used is highly unethical, but adding so that they're being asked to do it under the threat of not being hired makes it worse. It's kind of like your livelihood being threatened if you didn't get the MAGA jab. Interestingly enough, James, SAG-AFTRA president Fran Drescher says she was willing to strike in 2021 over COVID vax mandates, but she didn't, and they got mandated. So she says all this again now when it costs nothing to be a patriot. First they came for the Nigel Farages and I didn't say anything. Then they came for the coal miners and I didn't say anything. What? Because I was paid to push an agenda that, came back to bite me in the ass. And it's come to New Mexico today. SAG-AFTRA picketing event comes to New Mexico. Dozens hit the picket lines Wednesday morning outside Albuquerque Studios, bringing nationwide protests to New Mexico. Albuquerque Studios is the place Netflix bought a few years ago. They make some of your favorite drug war fantasies and ultra-violent satanic 80s kids shows there. In the picket for the SAG-AFTRA strike, members of the union, background actors, and supporters hosted signs in solidarity for better pay, higher residuals, and protection against the use of AI to replace performers. Actor James Vanderbeek of Dawson's Creek fame, a guy who knows a thing or two about getting residuals from a show you did decades ago, made a video where he said AI is the monumental reason for this strike. So I actually asked a buddy in the biz for his thoughts. Quote, they knew it was happening for sure, and I believe this is a thing that's been happening for a while, full body scans. But everyone will be under the impression it's always for special effects, posters, and lunchboxes. This thing is the idea that they can use you into perpetuity. If they want to sell the show later, they don't have to call you, end quote. And at some point, really, James, they won't even need the body scans. They can just print new celebrities out of thin air like the Federal Reserve. And I know you recall this story from last year. I think you and I were both pretty fascinated by it. Bruce Willis denies selling his digital likeness to deepfake company. After his dementia aphasia diagnosis, he basically announced he was going to retire. A firm basically said he sold his digital twin to us. And all of that, even, James, was before the fake Drake controversy. This is pretty interesting media monarchy stuff, man.
It sure is. And we were talking before we started recording here about, are these guys lawyers just incompetent boobs in all of this and just couldn't figure out what was happening? But look, I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV. I've never seen one of these contracts. I don't know how they work. But I do know that for many decades, there has been in the clauses of these actors, the likeness clause, that we get your likeness to be used in promotional materials and put in the action figures and everything. And I remember at some Lifetime Achievement Award or other for George Lucas, Carrie Fisher was giving one of the speeches, and she made some sort of joke about when she looks in the mirror, she sees a face that George Lucas owns or something like that. And And so this is known, this has been around for a while. I'm assuming that the studios are just saying, yeah, we own your likeness, including the ability to replicate you in some sort of, deep fake format. And I assume that's where this is being pushed back. No, we didn't agree to that. We're agreeing to, you can put our picture on a movie poster or something like that. Anyway, it's interesting. I think if they can, they will. And at the point at which, if they really push this and they get it in their contract so that you can never hire another actor again unless you get their explicit on the record contractual consent to use their deepfake likeness in perpetuity, at some point the studios will just go, well, we are going to create completely fictional non-people. We're not going to use real actors at all. That will happen at the point at which they can make that happen, right? And as you say, yeah, okay, Hollyweird, boo-hoo, but let's use our imagination here, people. This type of technology may be coming to replace you in pretty much whatever industry that you are in, and whatever it is that you're doing. But don't worry, there's a solution for that. UBI. Don't worry, as long as you're a good citizen, you take whatever the government tells you to take and put it in your body, and you say everything they tell you to say, then you can get your monthly stipend and live in your digital pod watching the fake actors that they've deep-faked into existence, right? Yay. But, we saw that you did it. You went to CorbettReport.com last month. You were listening to Morning Monarchy? Oh, I'm sorry. No rations for you this month. Oh, boy. New World Next Week sigh, huh?
That's even if they have the ability to reach those websites at that point. Or will be, which maybe that's the best thing, will be on cassette tapes, will be on physical media, will be contraband that secretly gets passed around. Like all the best underground revolutions, I suppose, James. It's also not just Kevin Spacey and Stanley Kubrick's birthday today. It's a real powerful day in the sort of the esoteric. It's also Aldous Huxley's birthday, so I did find myself today on my Media Monarchy stream playing a clip of him saying, my Brave New World is way more likely than 1984, because we'll get people to love their servitude. And you'll get some soma, you'll get maybe some free sex all the time, as is talked about in Brave New World. It does seem like the more likely avenue, and maybe that's the carrot to 1984's stick. James, I've already been replaced by AI DJs in Portland. I don't know if we've talked about that story. There's a film, I don't know the year off the top of my head. I haven't actually seen it, but it stars Al Pacino, and it's about a digitally created actress called Simone, but it looks like it's got numerals in it that it looks like Sim1, Simulation 1. And what the other thing we were talking about before we started to roll, did all the bands and artists immediately go on strike when the fake Drake songs started to hit and say, we're not going to play another note until you clarify on the record that you're not going to let all this AI stuff destroy us? I don't think they did that. And James, I see Ewan McGregor and Liam Neeson's likeness every month on the Marvel Star Wars comic books. It's a really interesting thing where dudes that I know are still alive mixed in with people they told me have passed away. And at some point, maybe it all just comes down to people won't know the difference if you've got deer antler filters on or not. That is New World Next Week, episode 524 for the time being, and as long as we're able to do it, newworldnextweek.com supports our work with DVDs, with shirts, with hats, with the aforementioned USBs, physical media. Also, P.O. Box Cash is a great way around debanking, as long as, again, Hoover isn't going through all of our mail with the FBI. And again, I want to remind you, I play the exclusive audio of these New World Next Week episodes on my stream Thursday mornings before they are published anywhere else. MediaMonarchy.com/listen. Indeed, James, that is New World Next Week, episode 524, buddy.
Awesome. Looking forward to doing it again. Thanks for the stories.
All right, man. Take care.
Next, we have a clip from the Indie News Network on free lunches for K-12 school programs.
Right, so women led the effort to make Minnesota one of the latest states to implement a universal free lunch program sparked by the federal government's pandemic response. And I think that they saw...
Okay.
Right, well, they're using the excuse, but
Go ahead.
the studies that showed that children that were fed and didn't have to worry about being hungry learned better, performed better, and that kids should not be hungry in school. Minnesota's universal free meal legislation is part of a burgeoning national movement to provide all students with no-cost breakfast and lunch. Through the end of 21-22 school year, the federal government provided free meals as part of its pandemic response, no matter a family's ability to pay. I know that happened for us too. I know my kids got like free lunch if they wanted it at school. I thought that was great. Like, we sent it lunch with them most of the time, but that it was available to them was huge. And by the way, most schools around the world, they make it free to students also. Lawmakers and advocates at public schools and for kids, talking not college, or I'm not even sure about high school, but lawmakers and advocates who fought to implement Minnesota's free school meals program expected to improve student health, behavior, attendance, and performance, and the stigma associated with receiving free meal or reduced price lunch, and stop shaming practices in which students without money for meals are overtly or covertly penalized. And they talk about all different kinds of scenarios and reasons why food insecurity, right, has been linked to school absences, poor reading, math test scores, misbehavior. Small children experiencing it are more likely to repeat a grade. So I want to see more universal. Look, we don't need to be funding Ukraine, $100 billion to Ukraine. We need to be funding feeding our kids and making sure that our kids going to school aren't embarrassed by the fact that they can't afford lunch. And I think this is a good thing. I know that the libertarians and the Republicans would definitely go bootstraps, and they would be completely against this. But this is one of these things.
Until it was their kid that didn't get lunch.
Well, the thing is that they're usually capitalists who can afford to pay for lunch. They're not usually of the poorer variety, in my experience. They tend to be those of more resources.
They took our gerbs.
Well, maybe. Or they're just, I can't really explain why they would not want the costs. I mean, it's not, the costs are minimal and minuscule in comparison, and that is an investment that we need to make in our kids. That is the way that I would see this. Here's Leah Gardner, who is the policy director at Hunger Solutions Minnesota. I'm very grateful for a really broad, diverse coalition that came together to get this done. I wanted to see somewhere they talked about what the costs were. But she would send us off to school having some degree of certainty or reassurance that while at school, we would get something to eat. This is also reassuring for single parents and poorer families. And it's easing tensions from parents that are worried that they can't afford to pay for meals for their kids at school.
How dare you have children out of wedlock, sir?
Right.
How dare you?
Hold on a minute. I'm looking for, I'm trying to search for the dollar figures.
Yeah.
Older students typically know that their meal accounts are in arrears and avoid the lunch line altogether, so they won't be shamed in front of their peers. Students eligible to receive free or reduced meals also experience stigmas and fear standing out from their peers. But now that universal free lunch is a reality, she expects school personnel to benefit as well as students and families. Teachers and other personnel will no longer have to pack extra lunches for students without meals. Cafeteria workers will no longer feel the dread that accompanies turning a child away from the lunch line. School nutrition staff won't have to spend their time trying to recover meal debt. So, up top, though, I know I saw something about, here you go, $400 million in the program's first 2 years to feed K through 12 students, regardless of household income. I applaud that. 100% applaud that. So I wanted to give a shout out to that. That's where government can actually do something good, folks. Doesn't happen very often.
This should be like the bare minimum. This to me is like trains getting there on time.
Right?
Like basic crap.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Also, how's Biden doing with the trains getting around on time? How's that?
Oh, goodness.
Is it working out?
They're not derailing. When they don't derail. When they don't derail.
Funny that. There's a joke in there. You know,
there's
even another guy got the trains on time. You know?
Last but not least, here's a clip from Allison Morrow and her interview with Cristian on the dioxins in East Palestine, Ohio.
With The Last American Vagabond is back. He will take over my show in the event that my internet goes out on me. Ryan, just a shout out to The Last American Vagabond before we go any farther, where you do all kinds of news analysis, and it's a great way to get up to speed on what's happening. But interestingly, Ryan, you told me that you are combing through the internet constantly looking for stuff for your show, and you somehow missed this. Updated controversial vent and burn in East Palestine derailment may not have been needed. What I got out of this is basically these witnesses are saying the conditions that were originally cited as making the controlled burn a necessity may not really have been there, in which case it made this whole thing, this whole mess unnecessary. That's what I got out of it. But we have two things to talk about. Could you explain the issue itself, and then just tell a little bit about why you feel like it didn't necessarily cross your screen when it happened? Because this is a month old.
Yeah. Well, just on that first point, I was really blown away by this. That you miss things even when you're looking, especially with the way things are today. I think we see that there's a really kind of uncomfortable control. Whether we know you search for Google for things these days, you get what they want you to see, and that's their stated discussion. By the way, it's not some kind of conspiracy theory that you can search for vaccine something and you're going to get all this COVID-19 information. It's like, well, I didn't even ask for that, so it's really hard to find things like that today anyway. But I was surprised to find out that after a month, and I've been really talking about what's going on in East Palestine, the main point being how absurd and how incredible it is that you can have 5 or 6 different independent groups, including the Texas A&M investigative team that went there and found exactly the opposite of what the EPA is saying. The last study I saw was at the highest level, and this is not hyperbole, 14,000 times percentage higher than the control group in testing for dioxins in the air filters of these homes. That was Scott C. Smith. Nobody cares. The point is the EPA is saying, nope, that's not true. Our tests say you're fine. Everyone's throwing up and getting sick. Not everybody, but a lot of people. Still to this very day. So it's just mind-blowing that this is such an obvious story and all they just say is you're wrong and all the evidence points otherwise. So my point is I've been really trying to find more information about why and how and just keeping up on this because it makes me mad that so few people seem to be talking about this. So I end up finding this from an article covering the most recent train derailment, which also involved Norfolk Southern in Pennsylvania, which apparently only spilled, they claim, a bunch of silicon pellets, but there was a lot of other dangerous things in the train. So as we're seeing in East Palestine, people are going, is that true? Is there a bigger problem? Are we being lied to? These are obviously valid questions because we're still being lied to over here. So in the process, I'm at the end of this article about it, and I see this little added note, because in East Palestine, they ruled this wasn't justified. And I kind of fell out of my chair. I'm like, well, that can't be true. I've been looking for this. And so I go and I find it. And I find the actual hearing discussion and the notes and the back and forth and articles like yours. Now, to the point, what it really is, as far as I can tell, the story around it is that in the very beginning, the argument was that the risk of them exploding was too dangerous and that they weighed it and said, well, because we know that it's likely going to explode, we can't just wait and the shrapnel may fly and that might hurt people. So they argued, which even right there, this is not true, that it makes more sense, it's safer to dump the liquid on the ground, set it on fire with no control, no barrier between the ground. None of that makes any sense. Ask any expert, they'll tell you that's absurd. Even with the window they said they had, there was enough time to lay down something. Now, the point is, what's coming out now is, and also I should add that both Alan, the CEO of Norfolk Southern, and the EPA, we can prove to their own statements and Biden statements and actual records that they were on the ground within hours, within days, and in other people's cases, there's multiple agencies, so they were involved. So no matter what happens, the EPA being the leading federal agency, they're responsible for choices that were made from there forward. That's just how this works, right? So the reality has been based on these hearings, and the expert being, I believe the group is called Oxyvinyl. It's the company that actually knows, is the leading expert on this topic in regard to vinyl chloride and this chemical that we're talking about. They basically stood up and said that Alan Shaw is misrepresenting the situation. That ultimately, before all of this, that he reached out to them and they said, because it's not just vinyl chloride, apparently it's a treated version of vinyl chloride that is made in a way that it's less likely to be volatile in the way that they're describing it. Then they even say that based on the fact that the data shows that the tanks weren't even ready to, that they were working properly, that they were venting the way they were supposed to, and that apparently there was only a different car that was not even vinyl chloride that there was a risk of exploding. That's not the story we're being told. And the idea being that because that one might explode over here or might be potentially at risk, that we have to vent and dump all the vinyl chloride specifically and light it on fire. The point is the company's saying that that wasn't even likely. They told them point blank, that's most likely not going to happen. And then, and here's the most important part, Alan Shaw, the CEO of Norfolk Southern, then brings this information, or rather doesn't, to the group. So he fails to tell anybody else that the expert said it's probably not going to happen. So the risk, the hype, everything that they pushed for the reasoning wasn't even true. And then the worst part is that they then, both EPA, Alan Shaw, Norfolk Southern, then basically in this meeting tell the volunteer fire chief that it was his decision to decide whether they were going to do this, and then pressure him with a 13-minute window, telling him that when the daylight's going to end, we have to do this right now, pressuring him to make this choice. And then he decided to do what they said was most likely, or the best thing to do. Now we're looking back, and he testified, and he's telling him he was railroaded. On the record, he's saying, I was railroaded. Nobody gave me the information. He didn't tell me. The expert said it wasn't going to happen. They pressured me to do this, and now they're blaming him for why it happened. I mean, this is completely dishonest. This is absolutely criminal. And the bottom line is they found that the venting and burning, the way they did it, the uncontrolled burn, was unnecessary. So my question is, was this about something else? Was there something bigger going on that we weren't supposed to see? Or just taking it as the most basic reality? As we've already seen, just like with the recent Pennsylvania one, the point being that they wanted to get the train up and running as soon as possible at every other cost. That's why we know that they actually buried dangerous chemicals, laid track over it, got the train out of the way, only dig it back up and get rid of it. So they did this for their own interests, and that's very clear. But I'm wondering if there's more to the story. Now, there's more we could get into, but I think that basically hits all of the points here. But the real idea is that the experts are saying that it wasn't going to explode the way they said it did. It was acting the right way, that the chemicals were probably not going to explode anyway because they were treated, and then they failed to tell anybody that. I mean, no one's being held accountable for this.
Okay, so 2 quick questions. And Ryan's also on Locals at allisonmorrow.locals.com. You can be on my editorial board, $5 a month to put in questions ahead of time for interviews. And Ryan, there were a couple that came on this subject that I want to throw your way. But 2 points of quick clarification. When I read this article, they're saying may not have been needed. And they're quoting people that, it was a quick decision made with the best information they had, and maybe it would have been needed. That it may not have been needed. It's not a definitive. The way you're talking about it sounds like you're either your research or maybe it's your opinion that it wasn't necessary.
The direct quotes from the group. Yeah. The point here is that what we're seeing, in my opinion, is the politicized corporate media version. And the reality is, directly from their own statements, are that, and I can read it directly here. First of all, the quote that they said directly from Oxyvinyls. And of course, the point is they're not sent. They can't predict the future. So they're not going to say this is exactly what they said. We made it clear based on our expertise. And by the way, the point is they actually said in multiple times, they said they repeatedly told Alan Shaw that based on our expertise of the properties and the fact that this was treated and stabilized, it's called VCM, would be unlikely to spontaneously polymerize, which is the thing they're saying, under the conditions described. And they go on to make the point to say none of the cars ruptured or leaked the flammable pressurized gas during the derailment. None of them. It was other things that were leaking. That's not what we're being told. But the cars, it says, but the tank cars were exposed to extreme heat from the ensuing fire and resulted when other cars and their contents burned. So the main point is they're saying, look, everything worked the way it did. The vents were working. So based on the fact that the tank alone was working properly, that in and of itself argues it wouldn't have exploded. Then they're telling us because this was treated, that on top of that, that's even in and of itself less likely to be spontaneously polymerized. And so the point is that is like a study saying, the bottom line is they're not going to come out and say it wouldn't have happened, because you can't say that, right? So the corporate media is representing this as if it's this up in the air concept, and they're taking advantage of that. If you listen to the entire testimony, it's very clear. They told him multiple times that this is not the right choice. This is not what you should be doing, that everything's in the right place, that the vents, that the tankers are not breached, the vents are working. I mean, at the end of the day, the bottom line is that he failed to relay any of that to the team that was making the decision. So, I mean, look, we can debate about whether this was the right choice or not. Why would you not relay the information from the expert that's saying it's most likely not needed to the guy that you pressure with a 13-minute window to make that choice? That's just dishonest, no matter how you spin that. I think that's pretty clear.
One thing I learned when I was an environmental reporter in TV news was how closely the railroad companies, the train companies work with the government. It was just an area of industry that I don't think I heard talked about very often in the news in my old industry. We just didn't cover trains that often. But when I was covering this lawsuit about I confuse terms. Fly ash is what happens at the coal plant. The ash that flies off, basically the coal that flies off of the trains because they don't have to really secure it. And there was this environmental lawsuit related to coal packed on these trains and not being covered appropriately, getting into the Columbia River, and there being toxins that were getting into the Columbia River because of this. And I just learned through that there was just this very cozy relationship between these companies. Like, you just don't think about it, trains being very powerful companies, but they are, and they work very closely with the government regulators, and there's just a very cozy relationship between those two. And so, like, kind of just to what you were saying, I don't think the media has, I mean, for me, I was just covering that particular lawsuit, and I was an environmental reporter. I did it full time, and I was rarely on that specific vein of the environmental beat. The average reporter probably doesn't do anything on this. So I think there's a lot of illiteracy when it comes to understanding these issues anyway. And I just find that if they want to give the benefit of the doubt to somebody, they will. You know what I mean? Like that, we all kind of do that, I guess. If we like somebody, but you see that on a corporate news scale in stories like this, where it's like, like you were just saying, well, if we want to give them the benefit of the doubt, then it may not have been. But if we don't like them and we don't want to give them the benefit of the doubt, then we'll totally crucify them as like, it wasn't necessary. So it just depends on, I guess, who you're willing to give a longer leash to. Real fast, everybody, don't forget, if you want to be an extremist, but you don't want to go to federal prison, go get some extremist altitude wine. 9,000 feet in the middle, 6,000 feet on either side. These are my favorite wines, and they're a great way for you to support my work. AllisonWinePromo.com, 50% off the wine, 50% off shipping. Kids are going back to school at some point, so you'll have plenty more time during the day to drink. I don't know, maybe your boss won't like that. Maybe you have a job like me and you can be drunk all day. Actually, you can't be drunk all day for me because you're a mom. But anyway, don't take my kids, CPS. They probably already, what's funny, Ryan, you'll actually really love this. So I was talking to somebody, a friend of mine from growing up. We were visiting the other day because now I'm back in Florida, so I can visit with some of my old friends. And I was talking to her about how, like, most kids have, I don't know, maybe they're in daycare or whatever, but my kids are home. I'm with my kids at home, and I can do this podcast, and they listen to all these people talking about these crazy subjects, all the time. It's just like part of their normal childhood. And so I was joking. I was like, yeah, I mean, my kids listen to conspiracy theorists all day, and like, that's the normal way of doing things. And then, like, an hour later, my daughter, she like headlocked her brother, who's 10 months old and can do nothing to her. But she said to me, he's after me, and I he's trying to get me. And I turned to my friend and I said, she thinks everybody is trying to get her. And she's like, well, you do she listens to conspiracy theorists all day. What do you expect her to think? So it's just funny. I mean, I'd say that is a very nice, I consider myself a conspiracy theorist. It's just hilarious to me. It's just funny. Because she was like, she's like, well, she thinks everybody's out to get her. That's what, you do too. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of true. But it kind of probably is true that everybody's out to get us anyway. That is true.
Well, I mean, it's basic reality that you represent all sorts of different things that people in power want. You're what you can produce, what you are. I mean, it's just the basic reality of life. But what's funny is that, I make the same point about the term conspiracy theory. It's, it is a derogatory term, right? At the end of the day, though, but we take it as a badge of honor because the truth of it, and it's the way it's used, I should say. All you're really saying is that we are discussing, we are theorizing, we're talking about people that would come together and discuss how they could better their lives at the expense of yours. Like, it's amazing that that's something that we laugh about. Like, that's crazy. Well, that's literally what governments do. That's literally what people do this, and yet we act like it's. Here's the interesting thing: it's only ridiculous when it's people in power who are caught doing bad things. Funny how that works out, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, I remember when was it Damar Hamlin? Is that his name? The football player that collapsed, and there was this article. I think it was NPR. I showed people how they were speculating about what happened to him, and they came up with this heart condition I'd never heard of before. And they did this whole article without knowing any real facts about his case and just like made up stuff about what could have caused his heart attack or him to collapse on the field, I guess. I don't know if we know it was a heart attack, but anyway. So yeah, when they want to speculate, they totally will speculate. But then when somebody else speculates, you're a conspiracy theorist. I mean, it's just, or even doesn't just speculate, but says something that's actually true, but isn't within the safety window of ideology or information. Then like you're speculating, but they can do it all day long. They can make all kinds of wild assertions that don't have any grounding in reality. And that's just having an opinion, but if you do it outside of it, you're a crazy person. Okay. Let me just tell everybody about coffee real fast.
Because they're more intelligent than us, Allison. Yeah. That's the point. They're better and more moral. Like that's literally how they perceive the world, is that they're allowed to do that because they're the experts, and that's just, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. They're the safeguarders of public health and
as Mika wellness. Says on Morning Joe, we're the ones that's supposed to tell you how to think. She actually said that.
Right. She did. Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's pretty funny. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. There's some funny slip ups that come from that show. Okay. TwinEngineCoffee.com/Allison, USDA certified organic roast, light roast, dark roast, Katura tea. If you like tea, it tastes like black tea. It's the fruit around the coffee bean. These are also all high altitude as well. And both great companies that support my work. Don't tell me what to say. Don't tell me who I can talk to. Don't do anything other than just help me stay in business. So go show them some love. Get yourself some coffee and wine. And let's get back to Ryan. Okay, so Ryan, I just want to throw a question or two at you about this specific topic over at Locals.
Can I say one more thing before we move past the story? I mean, I really recommend that people go watch my show I did yesterday about this. So it's not just me trying to kind of get.
That's how I saw it.
Well, because it's important, because it's very clear. It's important to be skeptical, but if you just look at what happened between the dynamic and you look at what the fire chief is literally saying on the record, he feels he was railroaded, right? So what happened here was dishonest, and it's very clear that something was being pressured, and whether that's just profit or something larger, I don't think it's even up for debate, and of course the media comes in and basically just tries to make it, it's just, we don't know. But that's not what they're saying, though. Yes, we don't know for sure, but they're saying very clearly this information shows that this was likely not going to, and then he didn't even tell anybody. Well, I mean, it's gross the way the media tries to reframe these things.
Yeah, it just made me think of like climate change, how certain they are about like all the things that are going to happen to us within the next 5 to 10 years, related to climate change, and never report about it as if it's like speculation. But then but then when there actually is reason to be like, this is not the. They'll be like, oh, we just don't know. It's like, well, as you're saying, there is a lot to confirm, but they just don't know in this case. But where they want to confirm and where it fits with their narrative, then it is confirmed. I mean, I know it's like, hey, listen, it's something that all people do. The problem is when you're in an industry where you're telling people you're an authority and you're telling people the truth like that, then I just saw my old company, one of my old managers, actually, she posted it on Facebook about having this storytelling training session at their newsroom. And, I used to be one of those trainers. I was sent around the country, here's how to hold your camera, here's how to get a good shot, here's how to get good audio, how to just be like a more interesting journalist. But we never went to workshops where people taught us about how to be a better journalist, like
here's how to look like a better journalist.
Exactly. But see, that's not how we were thinking. We were just thinking like this. We were thinking we were already good at journalism. We just needed to get better at presenting it. But actually, we sucked at journalism, and me included. Some people did it well. Okay, it wasn't. I'm not saying like everybody was terrible, but like I was definitely one of those people who had a lot to learn and needed way more, I think, encouragement and leadership focused on critical thinking, not how to hold my camera and position it in light the right way, or how to do my own graphics or something like that. I needed better skills at like critical thinking.
Here's a good example really quickly on the point we're making is that so hypothetically you got Oxyvinyl, the expert, right, saying that it's most likely not what was needed. And like you're saying, that becomes, well, we don't know for sure. But of course, let's invert this and pretend like that's Pfizer saying that these things are most likely not going to kill anybody. And then the coverage being they're absolutely safe and effective, which is ultimately the same thing that's happening. So to your point, I mean, that's how this is played. The uncertainty is the expert says it and they already agree becomes, clearly this is the right thing. In this case, they're siding with the corporations. Big surprise. Oh, well,
okay, Ryan, I'm here. No, I'm here. I just muted myself because my kids are staging a mutiny right now. Okay, let me throw a couple questions. Yeah, let's do some questions so that I can deal with them. All righty. I think these are all in line, so I'm just going to throw them all at you at once. How do the East Palestine and South Pennsylvania derailments compare? How would Ryan compare the East Palestine community rape with the Flint, Michigan community rape by the greed-driven corporatocracy? And how did the railroad profit from unnecessarily blowing up the tank cars, which poison the environment and the community?
Okay, yeah, leave right there in case. So yeah, so this the first one. How did it comparatively? I mean, that's hard to say because according to EPA, East Palestine's fine. It's not true. I mean, every single independent expert that's there is going, this is crazy. There's high levels. Even the Guardian wrote an article saying super high levels compared to, they just lie about it. I mean, it's just so incredible to me how this keeps happening. But my point there is that they're lying about the reality on the ground, but because of independent experts, proven that there's a problem. So in Pennsylvania, we're being told everything's fine. You know what I mean? But that's the best we have right now. As far as I can tell, based on my efforts, the surrounding areas, I've done some research. It doesn't appear to be a problem. I don't see any indication there's a problem. So I would compare them as one being a pot. For instance, there was, I think it was tetrachlorine ethanol. I might be mispronouncing that. I think something used for dry cleaning. That was on this Pennsylvania train, as well as some other things that could have been very bad if they got out, but they claim they weren't. And again, I don't see anything around there. So I would say that there was potentially as dangerous, but didn't end up being kind of thing. Well, of course, then assuming that somebody would have been ridiculous enough to dump all the chemicals on the grass and light them on fire, then it probably would have been as bad as East Palestine, because that's what made that as bad as it is. The other one, how would Ryan compare the East Palestine community rape with the Flint, Michigan community rape by the greed-driven corporatocracy? Well, it's interesting. I actually thought about this with Flint, Michigan at the moment that happened. Derek wrote about this. A lot of people have been covering this for a long time now, that the water in this country was equally bad in a lot of other places. There's been reports that have come out again, actually, in the last so many years, but came out right around that time. More than 50% of this country deals with high levels of lead in their water. And we don't even get into things that I argue are actually probably more dangerous, high levels of dioxins, and then maybe not as dangerous, but PFAS and all these different things we know are literally just or glyphosate. I mean, all these are EDCs, endocrine disrupting chemicals, and these are dangerous. But so my point would be, I wonder if Flint was something to sort of focal point, like to make us think, well, Flint's the only place and now it's out of the story, so everything's back to normal. Like that's kind of how people, even though Flint never even got helped, like they just left the story, right? So comparing the two, I would say Flint was, what we could prove was a clear act of profiteering by the government to move to the other body of water, which caused the problem for their benefit. So that's obvious. And then maybe there's more we don't see. In East Palestine, again, unless there's something else, which I really think there might be, that was going on there. The reason nobody talked about this for 10 days and how that's even possible, and the fact that there is, obviously some weird kind of cover, the way that the media acted, it feels like there might be a national security overlap to this. That was just my thought. I have nothing to back that up. But that being said, based on the way it looks like an accident, which then they took action to reduce their liability and try to keep the railroad going. So I feel like they're slightly different, but either way, it comes down to government and corporations doing what they want at your expense. And I think that's very clear everywhere we look, right? But yeah, there's a lot to get into to overlap. But then the last one, how did the railroad profit from unnecessarily blowing up the tanks? Well, that's a really hard question to answer because I don't know how they think. And I'm not as stupid as the mainstream media to pretend that I know what Putin wants to do tomorrow and what he's going to say and what he wants to do. That's he wants to overtake this and that. It's just kind of stupid the way they do that. We can say we think this is how he thinks, but can you go back real quick just so I can see the question? Oh, I think she might have taken off. Okay, the question.
I'm here. Hang on.
Sorry, I blanked on. I just want to get the right context.
Let me go back to it right here.
It was the how do they profit? Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So the idea would be that the obvious way, let's just take this as the surface level, that you could say that they simply just wanted to get the railroad up and running as fast as possible, right? And that seems to make a lot of sense because now in Pennsylvania, you even got the first responders and the police saying that their number one priority is getting the train running again. I mean, and I just thought that was crazy. So this is the recent Pennsylvania one. What about the people that are still worrying there's a problem? What about other areas? What about crime that might have happened while everybody was in this weird zone? Like the police are more worried about getting this corporate railroad running. Like that's a very weird statement. And I think the same thing was happening in East Palestine, that every asset was being marshaled to make sure this could get going fast. And again, that's why they literally bury dangerous things that only had to be dug back up because they were dangerous. You don't do that unless the point was, just to get the car out of there. And again, maybe there was something else on there they didn't want us to see. But in regard to the profit, it could have been again, the point in even answering it like this is to get into theories, which some people will call conspiracy theories, right? The idea of whether there was some design on the land in the area. And now they're talking about buying up the area. I mean, that's a fair question to ask. But I really do think this seems more like a just good old fashioned corporate cover up than anything else. That this was really just about them trying to hide what happened. And one thing that I think it was the Dark Horse podcast made a good point about this, that throughout history, any of these major disasters, we've seen them start to learn from how to do this. There's many ways it could be done, but two primary ways. They can either own up to it early and say, we did this, we'll do whatever we can to fix it. And really, in that case, maximize their liability. Have to spend as much as possible because they're on the fault for everything. And it's acutely aware that this is the small area that it's happening in, and we all know. Or they could do everything possible to spread the problem, which clearly maximizes your risk and the extent of the harm for the people, but minimizes their liability if you can do two things: spread it out and then stretch out the actions. So it takes 6 months to kind of figure out what's going on. And then by the time it all drifts away, the point is, well, how do we know that over there 60 miles away is because of me? How do we know if it's the same as it is over there? How do you know this close to the train wreck is because of us? And that's really kind of what's happening now. They're going, there's no problem. And then one of the main things we heard them say, they go, well, dioxins, first of all, what is that? Even though we know they know what's going on with that, we can show their own research, but then going, oh, well, we're not going to because the background level is about the same. Well, does that mean safe? It doesn't. And one of the main points you found out is they were basically worried to show, if testing, that look, there's a high level of dioxins in your environment right now. And that's pretty dangerous because they've known about this for a really long time. So that's from the EPA's perspective. But either way, the point is that you could argue that this was really about hiding something. And I do think there's an overlap with the government and the corporation specifically. But just getting the train running is enough for these people. Billions of dollars on the line with any number of things. And I'm not talking about just the one train. I'm talking about maintaining the infrastructure, the trust from people that want to hire them to maintain this. So everything was on the line here. And I think that kind of answers it the most, I think.
Okay, I have a couple other questions for you. What I talk about them off of YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, we'll be over on Rumble, Rockfin, and Locals. Remember, go to thelastAmericanVagabond.com, or Ryan's on Rumble and Locals as well, and go watch his whole report on the train derailment and everything we've talked about today. Go support him. We will see you on the other platforms. Okay, Ryan. There was a question about your take on Dr. Sam Bailey's report on RSV, the RSV vaccine upsell. I haven't watched this, so I don't know how to.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it, but I can comment on the RSV upsell in general. I think I'm super concerned about that in general. Like whether it's the RSV direction towards adults, which is completely unprecedented and nobody cares, or the idea that these are all mostly being based on mRNA technology, platform technology, or multivalent combining like RSV, flu, and COVID. And I mean, and most all of this is standing on technology that has been shown to be wildly dangerous. It's amazing that we can even acknowledge that and, take the blunt narrative that was sold right in the beginning, compare it to what we now know. And you can see that not only were they wrong about almost literally everything, but they were lying about most of it. And now standing on the ashes of this completely, I mean, they're literally building into the same problem. I mean, even Fauci wrote an article on Cell.com months ago saying that this ultimate idea was a failure, that they need to stand back and reevaluate how they deal with these respiratory viruses because it's not working. And yet they're still doing it. Exactly the same platform. It just doesn't make sense. And so the RSV thing is really concerning to me because classically it was always focused on children, right? And it's never been really that dangerous, but the point is that children can die. So it matters. We have to care about it, right? But then suddenly adults start going out of control, right? Suddenly all these different weird things start happening. We're baffled by excess death. We're baffled by the brain diseases. The point is, guys, I think this is very clearly, at least a large part of it, because of the vaccine side effects, because of what they're doing to the populations and many other things we could include. I don't think that just a random thing happened. And you could argue it's because the injection itself, which, by the way, their own documentation shows that RSV, an increased risk of RSV, is actually a potential side effect of the vaccine. It's in their own documents. But other than that, we know that what they do, and we can prove this, is they dramatically dysregulate your immune system, which then makes you more susceptible to everything. Adults, RSV, any number of weird things we haven't seen before. And we're watching that happen.
Okay, Ryan, there was one other question about, please ask T-Lab about his thoughts on Nigel Farage debanking and Nigel warning about regenerative social credit scoring based on social media posts.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's really alarming. It's not just Nigel. That was a while ago in the 24-hour
Can you
news
say
cycle.
what happened?
Well, I don't know the in-depth ins and outs. I just know I haven't done a segment on it, but I know that he got his bank account removed and, arguably for political reasons. I wouldn't even say arguably. I think that's kind of a common discussion right now. And the idea is that he's just like the bank and the government are acting like his views are unallowable. Right. In a civil society, we can't allow people to have their own opinions, and then quite frankly, you can listen to him and realize that he's not the white supremacy Nazi or whatever nonsensical hyperbolic thing they're saying about him, and the bottom line is he's been calling out things about COVID and plenty of other things. But it's really concerning because right now, and I think it's in Italy, in Australia, I'm seeing numerous examples where people are not able to access their own money, having their bank accounts just suddenly just going I don't even know where my money is anymore. Really alarming stuff happening. And some of that could be glitches, because I really do think that what they're doing is going to cause all sorts of disruption that might not be intentional. But I know some of this is intentional. I feel like we're for instance, one of the ones I just saw is a bank it's not doing anything I guess people wouldn't see as immediately surreptitious, but they're just kind of going, we're no longer dealing in cash. Didn't tell anybody. They just go in and go, oh yeah, we don't have cash anymore. You have to go to the ATM if you want that. You could only get $500. And other than that, you have to go online and transfer. And it's what? It just, and then what she tried to remove it and get it out and they wouldn't let her. So she had to literally transfer all of her money to a different bank, and somebody else did the same thing and they wouldn't let her even transfer all the money. So it's at what point did they start telling? I mean, they're letting they've always had control over the money. You don't have any money. It's not really even there. Fractional reserve banking and all that, right?
Yeah, dude, that's freaky, man. It is freaky how close to total collapse we really are. On that note, we're going to get back to feeding our chickens. Oh, wait, we don't have chickens yet. Cows, goats, and horses, but we will have chickens soon. I just got to get myself a mobile coop. Yeah,
you got to send me some pictures. I want to see it all.
Totally, yeah. We'll have to do a total live stream where we talk about that, fun stuff like that, and then I'll show pictures or whatever. Okay, Ryan, thank you so much for coming back on. Thanks everybody for watching. Any final thoughts before we go?
Just as always, guys, just be critical, be objective, right? I mean, I think there's an entire industry built on keeping you locked into the two-party paradigm. And we're watching these paragons of one side or the other crumble in front of us right now. You guys know who I'm talking about. There are people out there that have always been propped up as the people we should look at. And I genuinely think that it's about the two-party illusion, the establishment framing it as what they want us to see the left and right as. These absurd characterization, these cartoonish people that get put forward as the left and the right. And I think people are waking up to it. So let's keep questioning, guys. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I always love talking with you.
Oh, no, me too. And Lily, would you like to say anything before we go? Okay, she's building a house right now out of boxes because we still haven't unpacked. Yeah, all right. All right, bye, everybody. Thanks again.
Thanks again for tuning into another episode of The Independent Review. Hope to see you all next week.